Stick around after our episode for the question and answer section. We made it a year. 1 year's a long time to be doing this.
I know. We're so much wiser than when we started.
Wow.
The look you gave me.
So much wiser, yes.
I've learned a lot about Twitter.
Yeah, how to get to the mentions.
Only took like 8 months, so.
Welcome back to another episode of Is Fitz Happy? I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
This week we're discussing Chapter 24, Neatbay, on our 1 year anniversary, episode 52.
That's so neat, bae. Luke looks dead inside.
I don't just look it. I am dead inside. All right. We start out here with a reintroduction to the Pocked Man, that he's just used as a harbinger of doom and destruction and death and pestilence and all the bad things, and he's often used in puppet shows as well as a general omen of disaster to come.
And this is a reminder from last book. I think we mostly knew this because of last book when Chade and Fitz were seen by the very first raiding village.
Yeah.
Which is kind of poetic.
Survivors of Forge, I believe it was.
Yeah. And it's kind of poetic because now it's Chade coming to Fitz in the middle of the night to tell him that there is death coming. So
yeah.
Maybe he is the Pocked Man.
I mean, literally he is, but from the stories? So the beginning of this chapter is a little bit interesting. We've seen it a couple times before where Robin Hobb has done this, but it's kind of a smattering of small little scenes that spark up to a big one that we'll have to discuss. So it's like what Fitz has been doing in the meantime of the past couple days.
Right.
And his little interactions like that.
It's a good way to move the narrative along for months being in between them.
Yeah. And I don't think this is necessarily months in between, but it is in winter still, as far as I can tell.
Right.
In the chapter. So it's not full months, but it's definitely probably at least a week of Fitz moping around.
I think it's longer than a week. It feels like at least a month.
Yeah, maybe.
Winter's long. I assume it's similar to a Wisconsin winter where it's 6 months out of the year.
True.
So
it doesn't say that the winter is fully passed, though. So
right.
It is some time skip here, and we get a little overview of what Fitz has been doing and what he's been acting like and feeling.
Right.
So we get a little overview of Fitz from where we left off. Molly and him have split temporarily.
Right.
Saying that I can't be by you because I'm bringing danger on you. Let me deal with this my way. And that makes him sad, of course.
Right.
And
he, of course, feels very alone.
Yes, he feels very alone. He says he's snappish to those who spoke to me casually, moody when I checked on Burrich, reticent with the queen. Chade, the only one whom I could have unburdened myself, did not summon me. And he's also paranoid about about the visits from Serene and Justin, because he doesn't know if he is going to get poisoned or killed or anything like that.
Right.
He's still only eating what he prepares himself. He's checking everything super carefully. Mm-hmm. He's just being ultra paranoid right now.
Right. And he's distancing himself from everyone, including Burrich. It says he's trying to go as quickly as possible just to help with the healing process because he's worried that will also bring danger into Burrich's life. And he's so scared. And this is what we see Fitz do all the time. Whenever he gets scared, he closes in around himself and just puts up more walls instead of leaning on other people for help, which we see you want to do that when he talks about Chade, but he can't because Chade is under hiding. So
Yes. And he can't even leave Buckkeep still because he's quarantined inside the castle walls and doesn't want to sneak out the secret way in case he is watched, and then he gives away the secret of Nighteyes and the secret that he is truly old blood.
Yes.
He calls on Shrewd daily.
Yeah.
So that's one of the tasks that he does do. But it's still very sad to him because he can see the king deteriorating before his eyes and the fool getting more and more morose and his humor more acid, as Fitz remarks. It's just a worsening situation that they can't really do much about. And within Buckkeep, there's still balls and parties and everything going on, so it's a really sharp contrast to what Fitz is feeling. There were masked balls and summonings of minstrels to compete for fat purses. The inland dukes and nobles ate well at Regal's table and drank well with him late into the night. We get a little scene with him talking to Burrich about this too, where Fitz is in the depths of his depression and cynical feelings towards the whole situation, where he says, like, all these nobles and everyone here are like ticks to a dying dog. They're just parasites. And Burrich kind of questions them of who's dying, and Fitz replies, everyone.
Which, fair enough. One day at a time, we're all dying. Did no one ever tell you that? Okay, Fitz, calm down.
Yeah. little over the board there, a little over the top. Burrich, as we see in this small scene, his leg is healing slowly, but it is healing, and he's still drinking.
Yeah. He says the wound doesn't feel healed inside, which I think is more of a metaphor than anything. And also, along with his drinking, Burrich has been avoiding the stables.
Yeah.
He's kind of left everything to hands. And this is, I think, a little bit of him running away too.
Oh, 100%.
Definitely
yes.
where Fitz gets it. But I think last chapter, the chapter before, I was a little harsh saying, how come Fitz couldn't get Burrich's good qualities? But obviously Burrich also has a problem with facing what's bothering him.
Yeah.
As he holds himself up and just drinks whenever he is not on duty watching the queen.
Yeah, so Fitz remarks that his days had a pattern now. Once he left Kettricken's door in the morning, he went to the kitchen and ate. Then he came back to his room and began drinking. After I appeared and helped him change the bandaging on his leg, he would drink until it was time for him to sleep, and wake up in the evening just in time to eat and then go guard Kettricken's door. He no longer did anything in the stables. He had given them over to hands, who went about looking as if the job were a punishment he hadn't deserved. Every other day or so, Patience sent Molly up to tidy Burrich's room for him.
And we get into Fitz being worried about Molly because clearly Burrich is drinking a lot. There's lines of empty bottles on his shelves that grows, and he's worried about Molly being reminded of her father. And I think it's really interesting that he's so worried for Molly, but also she's a big girl. She can handle herself.
Yeah. He still does say that he wants them to get to know each other, though. Mm-hmm. Because I thought that little offhand comment was really cute, because it is his father, pretty much, and that is what he thinks to be his future wife, which is true, but just in, 20 years, Fitz. So.
Yeah. But I mean, you want your parents to like your significant other and vice versa. And it would be hard to be like, no, I swear he's better than this normally. Yeah.
He's not always a drunken sod.
And Molly has such a cut and dry line about people who drink that I could see where his nervousness comes from. But poor Fitz, he's like, I hope they like each other. And then later he'll probably be regretting that thought.
They get into a little conversation about Molly as well. And Fitz tells him or hints at, and Burrich picks up on, that people are threatening to hurt her or are planning on hurting her because of her association with Fitz. And Fitz lets out that, some people, more than a couple, know that Molly and I like each other and have spent time together. Burrich, of course, is very irate at this, and like, you don't bring your women or your loved ones into your own problems.
Right. Which
isn't, like we're both over here looking at each other. That's not a great thing, but also, you don't want people to get hurt because of your actions.
Right. I think the way he says it,
the sentiment is right, but the whole cut and dry line is not right of where they draw that line.
Right. And then I think it's made worse by the fact that directly after rebuking Fitz for letting his woman be in danger because of his actions, he takes on ownership of Molly almost by saying, yes, I will protect her and convince her that what you're doing is right and Patience was right to send her to me. And it's kind of, I didn't like it. I don't know if you had any reactions to it or thoughts about it, but I didn't love this whole macho, like, clearly Patience is sending Molly to me because Molly needs protection when Lacey could protect Molly just fine. I don't think there's that underlying motive. I think Molly is being sent there to help because she is capable of doing it. And maybe it is a little to be like, see what you would get if you married Fitz. But I don't think it's like, oh, Burrich can take care of her, you know?
I think this was more comforting Fitz. I didn't see it as Burrich just kind of bragging, because Fitz explains the situation, explains the couple people. So I found it as like Burrich reassuring Fitz of like, oh, well, then I will tell her that you're worried about her, because he knows that he can't see her at the moment. I'm going to tell her that if she fears danger, she must come to me. I am more in a position to deal with it. He looked up and met my eyes. I'm going to tell her that you are wise to stay away from her for her sake. So he's like comforting Fitz and kind of like reassuring him that I'm going to help you through this situation. It's really bad that you did it. I agree the Patience was right and she was wise to send her to me is a little, it's a little too macho-y taking ownership of the situation, but I think right there the Patience was right, was referring to you should have just stayed away from Molly entirely. And I think that's why Fitz says, I blanch to consider the full implications of that statement. Because I think he's saying, like, your whole dalliance with Molly was a huge mistake. You put her in grave danger because of who you are. Right. So I think it was more like a subtle reprimand and not like she sent her here to, you know, for me to protect her. And Patience was right in that. That's fair. I hope that's more of the reading it was supposed to be. I think personally I just looked at it like, wow, okay, Burrich, this is weirdly uncharacteristic for you, and did not enjoy this section. But also he's been drinking a ton and is clearly not at his best at the moment. He's probably really struggling with the trauma he just went through. So him saying things a little out of character isn't that weird. And also finding a purpose in protecting someone isn't the worst thing to do. I think that's what he does. That is what he does to stop his grieving process usually. Right. Somebody else needs me, and so I have to get better, which is admirable. But I think just the way he did it, specifically in this section, I didn't like, because it made it feel like Molly doesn't have any agency of her own, or she wouldn't be capable of protecting herself. And I just didn't like that aspect of it. He drank his brandy down, then looked at the bottle. Slowly, he slid it across the table toward me. Put that back on the shelf for me, will you? He requested. So getting this story from Fitz and realizing the implications that a serving woman who doesn't have a lot of power or, you know, capability to protect herself from higher forces is in danger. He's like, oh, I will take on the task of, like, I'll be the go-to if she needs anything. He's like, I can protect somebody. I need to stop drinking. I need to be available all the time rather than just sober for my shifts with the queen. Right. Yeah. And I mean, ultimately it's good. And if that's what he needs to, like, get out of this funk, that's fine. I don't know. I think clearly he learns to respect Molly and they have a great relationship later on. And I'm not going to hold it against him for one thing he says in this series. But yeah, I don't know. I think that I was very interested to see your take because of how I read it. Yeah. And so Fitz continues on with a explanation and a discussion on what the folk the regular folk of the six duchies and town kind of think. He only gets certain rumors because he can't leave the castle really, so he gets hints and pieces from the stable boys and things like that. Soldiers won't talk to him much anymore. And it's pretty much Hans and the stable boys telling him that things are still getting shipped out and going inland, and people are thinking, oh, well, I guess they can't protect their own land and the Farseers are just going to abandon Buckkeep.
Yeah.
If the king could not hold his own castle, what hope was there for them? And when a shipment of fine old tapestries and furniture was sent upriver as well, the murmur became that soon the Farseers would abandon Buckkeep entirely, without even a fight, without even waiting for an assault. I had the uncomfortable suspicion the rumor was correct. And we know that's true. Regal, this whole time, has been prepping to abandon the outer coast and move inland. And that's been his plan. We've known that for at least a half a book.
Right.
If not more. Mm-hmm. And it's coming true because Verity is gone, can't really stop it. People distrust Kettricken because of his propaganda and his rumors that he's spreading. And King Shrewd is incapable of doing anything beyond his pain and his painkillers.
And it's so interesting because people aren't talking about Regal being the one scared and running away. They're saying it's the king. And that's what I found the most interesting, unless they're now just openly referring to Regal as the king, which I kind of doubt right at this moment. I don't think the average person in Buckkeep specifically is going to be that treasonous. Maybe some of them, but just the general sentiment of like, oh, the king is scared, I think is really interesting because of how sick he is. And it almost feels like people really don't understand that it's not the king pulling the strings right now.
I mean, Fitz didn't even realize how sick he was. So everyone else is thinking that Regal is fourth in line for the throne right now. How would he be directing anything that the king does? Right. And with the queen in waiting in the castle right now, without the king in waiting, she would be second in line or second in command as usual. However, she's a foreigner from the Mountain Kingdom, and if they're abandoning the coast, they're moving back closer to her homeland. Maybe they put more blame on her for moving. Right.
And it's so interesting because it's Regal saying, oh, I'm sending them there for safety, but not Regal getting the negative side effects of that.
Because I'm sure Regal's like, oh, the crown is sending them here, and we're doing this. And
it's just so interesting how clever Regal has been in the background of this whole story, because we don't hear every little thing Regal's doing. We don't get to see the niceties Regal says to spread rumors that are positive about him. We just hear the little tidbits, and it makes it really interesting because that means that there is still a whole world going on in the background of this series that we are not aware of unless Fitz turns his eyes to that.
Yeah, exactly. Fitz goes through more rumors here. Fitz is confined to the keep still, so people are gossiping about, oh, maybe it's because he didn't save that little girl in the forest from the Forged Ones or whatever.
I found that rumor to be more about the way he attacked the Forged Ones.
Yeah, it was talk had flown about me on the day I had failed to save the little girl, so I'm sure it's about like the result of the whole scene.
Setting the tone of he's a beast man.
Right. And that's where, like, he mentions that the soldiers didn't really talk to him anymore. He gets most of his information from stable hands because he's welcome in the stables, but also Fitz doesn't want to hang around there too often or hang around often around anybody at all.
Right.
Because he doesn't want them to be targeted either.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to be too close to the horses or any of the animals either.
Right.
To put more association on him.
It's just really sad to watch. I mean, he's getting away from all support systems in any capacity. He's not talking with the guards, which partially is because they're all spreading rumors about him.
Well, they don't talk to him.
Yeah, they're nice to him, but not like conversational anymore. But also, Fitz isn't a super open person, and I'm sure he's shutting people out just as much as they're worried to talk to him.
Yeah.
And I think if he would have come at it with an open attitude of, hey, isn't it so weird that I don't get to go anywhere, and made jokes about it or something, I think he could have left that door open, but he's just so used to closing every single door.
That could be true, yeah.
That I think that he's just
emotionally unavailable to everybody.
Strengthening his own bars of his own cage.
Talk is still about how Verity and his quest was, it was always ridiculed and looked down on, that it wasn't really worth anyone's time to do that. And also, as Regal was draining the warehouses of all food and stores for the winter, people didn't see any reason to conserve anything anymore. So there were more wild parties, fires broke out once in a while. It was just getting unruly in the town.
There's no sense of community anymore. He even says that hope had perished. It is kind of true, and it's being reflected. And I think this is more King Shrewd's fault than is usually given him the blame for, because I know technically right now he's sickly.
It started a while ago, though.
But yeah, this is directly because of choices Shrewd made. This started before Kettricken even came to the castle. Mm-hmm. And I think if he would have made a stronger stance then, that maybe people wouldn't be as ready to bash on all the Farseers and to be so hopeless. I don't know. Maybe just all of the unsuccessful guards, raiding parties, or anti-raiding parties, I don't know. Just because they've been so unsuccessful against the red ships, it's been really hard for them to keep up hope. And it would be, especially with everybody moving out of the castle, basically.
Yeah, what is this, 3 years maybe since the first start of the war?
I think so.
So it started a while ago, but also a 3 years long war of directly being raided and don't know if you're going to get attacked next. That does wear on your morale a bit. And
not only 3 years of attacks, but instead of the restful winter like normal, now they have taken hold north of you.
It's
and
looking
could at
worse.
Any moment come here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Fitz wakes up one morning and it just feels wrong to him. Everything is not feeling like it should. Feels a tickling of skill against his senses, and he didn't know whether that was Verity trying to get contact or Justin and Serene, so he can't really reach out. So he's living in that paranoia still. And he goes to visit the king as usual. He skilled feebly toward me, sitting up and smiling vaguely. "Ah, Verity, my lad, how did your sword lesson go today?" The rest of his conversation made as much sense. Regal appeared almost immediately after I arrived. He sat on a straight-backed chair, arms crossed on his chest, and looked at me. No words were exchanged between us. I could not decide if my silence was cowardice or self-restraint. I escaped him as soon as I decently could, despite a rebuking look from the fool. And I just wanted to read that out because I'm sure that's how most of his visits with the king go.
Yeah.
It's just a more and more deteriorated king, with the fool looking more and more haggard, and Regal just chaperoning everything.
Right. Well, they know Fitz is somehow getting messages to Verity, so he needs to see what exactly he could tell Verity. But also, I find this interesting, the beginning part of this, where he comes in and there's a little bit of skill reaching towards him from Shrewd, and he immediately says, "Ah, Verity." We know that Chivalry and Verity did not look like twins. They probably look related.
They looked like brothers, but they were definitely different.
Some siblings
builds
could be twins, even though they're definitely not.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think these are brothers that looked similar in that way. And so I think Shrewd is using his skill the same way Fitz uses his wit. And because he can feel Verity in Verity's skill presence in Fitz, and Fitz probably has walls up so tight that his own is not really spilling out.
Right.
That it's Verity. So it's like a really interesting thing to see somebody not use their eyes that isn't Fitz with a different magic, because I think Fitz's is more wit, and so it's feeling based, whereas there's way more limitations with the skill.
I really like that. I do want to offer a boring alternative to that, and it's just as you get old and your mental faculties decline, often people will call other people by different names.
Right.
Or, I don't know. My grandparents have often called me by my cousin's name and then corrected themselves or something. My great-grandparents once in a while called me by a different name.
Right.
And sometimes that happens, and we know Shrewd is super sick. So
right.
I do really like that theory that Shrewd is using his skill more because his actual senses can't really function right now with how much pain and how much the medicine is deadening him. And I like the fact that he could use the skill to identify people. But another alternative would be that he's just sick and old.
Right. Well, I brought up chivalry earlier because we know Fitz is basically a carbon copy of his father.
Right, yeah.
And I would think if he was going to mistake him from anyone, it would be chivalry. Especially if he's asking about Verity's horse lessons, which are sword lessons, which are probably from when he was a teen,
right,
if not a little older. So clearly he doesn't know what time period they're in. But I think recognizing Verity's spirit, or whatever you want to call it, could make him be like, oh, yes, it's definitely Verity, and he probably had sword lessons. Maybe that's what Verity did. He always came in after sword lessons or something.
Yeah, I like it.
I don't know. But I guess it could be something boring, too.
And so with this particularly dreary day, Fitz escapes the king as quickly as possible, goes back to his room, and starts drinking.
He also reflects that the fool is probably in just as much danger, if not more than he is, because the king is the only thing separating the fool from being attacked by Regal.
Yeah, that's his only protection.
Yeah, and the king is very clearly on death's door. So what happens to the fool next? And he feels bad that he can't help the fool, which I thought is really sweet, because even in this state of, I don't know, distress, where he's constantly looking over his shoulder and feeling like at any moment he could be killed, he's still worrying about everyone else, which is true about everyone in his life. But I think especially the fool, because the fool is so weak.
Yeah.
And has no one else.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas Molly has a network of friends, probably, and people like Patience and Burrich in her corner. And the fool is just so different that he doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't know. So it's just nice that he always wants to help people that he feels are vulnerable, whether or not it's misplaced. It is sweet.
So with Fitz getting drunk, drinking more and more, he eventually passes out and comes awake to Chade standing over him, ready to shake him awake. "Get up, you sodden fool! Idiot! Neatbay is under siege. 5 red ships. I wager they'll leave nothing standing if we delay. Get up!" I staggered to my feet, the muzziness of drink giving way before the shock of his words. "What can we do?" I asked stupidly. "Tell the king, tell Kettricken, tell Regal. Surely not even Regal can ignore this. It is at our very doorstep. If the red ships take and hold Neatbay, they will have us bracketed. No ships will get out of Buck Harbor. Even Regal will see that. Now go, go!" He rushes up, tries to, get some clothes on before he runs out, and then turns around as he's about to run away and asks Chade, "How do I know this? Whence do I say this warning comes?" Chade hopped up and down in frustration. "Tell them anything. Tell Shrewd you had a dream of the pocked man scrying in a pool of water. He at least should understand that. Tell them an elderling brought you the news. Say anything, but get them to act, and now." He races off and starts hammering on Shrewd's door. Burrich is up at that time, because that's what he does, guarding Kettricken's door, and Fitz tells him exactly what's going on. He yells it down the corridor. He knocks on Kettricken's door and he's let in right away. Fitz has a little
Burrich
bit...
does,
Yeah,
yes.
excuse me. Burrich knocks on Kettricken's door and it gets let in right away. Fitz has a little harder time getting into Shrewd's chamber.
Until he suggests that maybe it would be best if
Wallace himself gave the news to Regal.
Wouldn't Regal be so happy? And then he's like, oh yeah, you're right, and leaves, which of course he does.
I believe it was the prospect of making a dramatic entrance and conferring with the prince before all the merrymakers that decided him.
Because he does step aside to the side room to get ready, powder his nose, so to speak. But it is really interesting, just to back up a little bit, that's probably why Chade does know. He was scrying.
Oh yeah, he was. 100%.
And also, King Shrewd knows that Chade can scry reliably, which is really interesting that this is the first time it's brought up, I believe. I don't think Chade has talked about this skill at all up until this point.
He has. Oh. Yes. The first time they went to Forge, I think. I think he mentioned that. Or maybe it was the first... I think it was the first time they went to Forge. He mentioned it.
I've already forgotten it then. But...
Or maybe we just knew it.
Yes.
So we didn't recognize that he said it or if he didn't say it.
Right. It's really hard whenever you do know all the information. But I'm pretty sure, at least from my memory, that, like, I don't remember it being brought up before now.
Right.
I don't think Fitz knows that that's really how Chade got the information. Although he might be still slightly drunk, so... He probably doesn't really know much of what's going on.
True.
He's just been trained to do what he's told.
Fitz gains entry to the king's bedchamber, and he grabs a candle and tries to go to the bed, and almost steps on the fool, who is curled up like a dog at the king's... and on the floor, at the foot of the king's bed.
Yeah.
Fitz is astounded that he's there and laying down, and tells the fool what's going on. And the fool basically says that I can't really leave. I'm not afraid to go back to my room. I'm afraid to leave this one.
Right, because Fitz does ask why he's there.
Yeah.
And what's happening. And he mentions also that the fool had little more than a rug. Mm-hmm. He was not even a pillow or a blanket. So, very sad.
The fool says... With honey or whip, this night Regal offered me a purse with 5 bits of gold in it if I would make myself presentable and come down to entertain them. He flatters the fool a little bit, and then eventually the fool says, I would rather be up here than be a fool up here than be with the fools down there, or something along those lines. And Regal throws a teapot at him.
Right. And that makes Wallace frustrated because he just made that pot of tea.
With probably all the herbs and stuff that they need. So, yeah, they're really trying to get the fool away from the king, to isolate the king.
Right.
The fool is the one to wake King Shrewd. Well, he tries to, at least. He says gently, he's dabbing at his face like, Fitzchivalry is here with tidings, my liege, my liege. And Fitz can't really wait. He kind of blurts out in desperation, My king, your folk have need of you. Neatbay is besieged by red ships, 5 of them. We must send aid now, or all is lost. Once they have a toehold there, they could close Buck Harbor. The king's eyes opened as he spoke. He did not move from his prone position, but he squeezed his eyes more tightly shut as if clenching them against pain. Fool, a bit of red wine, please. My heart surged as if I were an old dog hearing the voice of a returning master. Because it's the king's voice. It is a conscious and very aware King Shrewd at this point, even if he is bracketed by pain. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this is probably why they don't want anybody around the king at all times, because it's impossible to keep someone fully drugged up 24/7.
Yeah.
You just can't do it. Even if it's for somebody's benefit, there's going to be times of lucidity. And luckily for Fitz, he happened to be there during one of these times. But it's very clear how little the king actually is aware of what's going on, because when he starts giving orders, he's making little mistakes and not realizing that one of the people that he wants to take charge is dead from the attack on Burrich. And it's just kind of sad to see him.
So I'm sure
falter.
Burrich was never called back to give more details.
Right.
I'm sure he only got that one news report from Burrich. He says, take pretty much every ship, all the fishing fleets, every warship that we have. We're fighting for our lives right now. And send people overland and have Kerf lead them. And that's the one that died with Burrich.
Right.
Oh, excuse me. Keen. Keen is the one who's dead. Kerf is the one who Fitz suggests. Yes. Sorry.
King Shrewd also says, how dare they come this close? How came they to such boldness? And it's just really sad because this is another example of, well, they came that way because you have let Regal take away all the ships and not fight against them for the past couple months, probably. And yeah, they're going to keep attacking inland because they know they can.
But even with that situation and a couple remarks later on in this chapter, it is rather bold for the raiders to do that because of what actually happens. They take 5 of their ships where they're only used to raiding with 1, maybe 2 on these little villages. And they've made pokes south of Buckkeep before, but they've always been repelled. They have the north above it in Burns, but this large scale attack south of Buckkeep to bracket in Buckkeep, as they say, and trap it on both sides is extremely bold because they have a high chance of losing a lot of their ships and their people if help comes to Neatbay.
Right.
And they were expecting and hoping no message would get out because that's what they were told by Regal, I'm sure.
Right.
But they didn't expect a scrying old pocked man in the middle of the wall.
Right. But yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to say is that Shrewd doesn't realize the reason they can be so bold is because they know no one will come. They're wrong because Fitz came at a good moment, but Shrewd doesn't realize how often he's let their attacks go.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's just like scary, I'm sure, for him to realize that he doesn't know what's going on at all times. But
yeah, and just like the thing that you mentioned before with the little details getting wrong in Shrewd's head, with Keen being dead with Burrich and Fitz correcting him, he falters. He's like uncertain of himself because how do I not know my own kingdom and what's happening? And Fitz offers a quick explanation and kind of curses himself out in his own head for interrupting.
Right.
So the king gains a little bit more momentum again after this. And all of a sudden, Regal shows up. What goes on here? The shouting began before he even reached the bedroom. It was Regal, puffy with drink and fury. Wallace, he pointed an accusing finger at me. Get him out of here. Get help to do it if you need it. You needn't be gentle. The 2 guardsmen that Regal had brought grab Fitz. The fool slips underneath the bed, and Fitz can't really blame him because he's not going to do anything to help. Plus, if he was found and this whole commotion was happening, the fool would probably get thrown out too.
Yeah.
And there goes his protection. There was nothing he could do for me by staying except be thrown out with me. And so Regal goes into his whole oily snake oil salesman scheme against his father and being, oh, what's happening here with you so sick? And what's all this ruckus? And
he's disturbing you on purpose so that you stay sick, so you can't get the rest you need.
And King Shrewd is aware of himself, like I mentioned before. So Fitz remarks here that his voice was not loud, but command was in it. Stand where you are, King Shrewd ordered the guards as they're dragging Fitz out. He still was prone in his bed, but he turned his eyes to Regal. Neatbay is besieged, King Shrewd said firmly. We must send aid. And Regal is all over this because I'm sure he knows it's happening.
Right.
But he's like, oh no, he's just delirious. Like, there's no messages. We didn't get anything. Obviously, he's here just to disturb you. This cannot be happening. He just needs to go.
He's making it up. And I think this really does, without someone who hasn't read it before knowing, show you that he's in on it, because there's not even a little bit of surprise.
No.
Because let's be real. If you heard that Fitz was telling your dad, hey, there's an attack, and you truly knew nothing about what was going on, you're not that evil, you'd be a little surprised he would go to those lengths. Like, there'd be some reaction.
You'd immediately be
something.
like, huh? How'd you hear? We didn't hear anything.
Right. It would be like a, what are you talking about sort of thing. There'd be some reaction, but the fact that there is no reaction at all, he immediately is shaking his head sadly, saying, no, he's lying to you.
Regal shook his head sadly. It is just another of the bastard's ploys to upset you and steal rest from you. There has been no call for help, no message of any kind.
So I don't know. I think that's it's something that you have to really be looking for to catch.
Yeah.
But the lack of reaction is very telling.
The first time around reading this, did you know that they were working together? Regal and the Red Ships?
I don't think I did fully. I think at some point I had suspicions, but I clearly did not know to the depths of which Regal was going. I figured at the very least he knew about all the attacks, but was just ignoring them. I didn't know that he was necessarily in contact
and
with
feeding information.
Yes. It did not surprise me to find out,
Right.
but I don't think I immediately was like, he's definitely talking with the Red Ships. I think maybe in here I was a little like, does he know? Like, what's going on? But I don't know. I don't think I did. What about you?
The first time around, definitely not. I don't read that closely, and if I am reading super fast or super into a book, I don't know if anybody else doesn't do this, but I'm not one to like predict or,
That's so strange to me.
think about what might happen next, except for very big overarching things. But not like little, this guy is doing this to do this to betray this. I'm not that kind of person. I'm just like, ooh, this is good.
That's so funny because I feel like the way I read is almost the way you would weave a tapestry, and that I'm focused on what's going on in the moment, but also I know that 4 lines down something might be coming. So I'm like constantly checking all the threads and seeing like, does this relate to that? Which I think is why I have so many harebrained ideas of what's going on magically in the background all the time.
You have the English major brain. Mm-hmm. Like, ooh, this all relates.
I know that this is Chekhov's gun. It has to be used in the 3rd act.
I know I've made references to Wheel of Time before because it's also one of my other favorite series, and I feel like that series and this has a lot in common where there is a lot of foreshadowing or little hints written in that you don't or would never pick up on the first time through. And as you reread it, it's like interesting little things that pop out, like Fitz's mother being in the market of Buckkeep Town. Mm-hmm. Just things like that just really light up in front of your eyes when you're rereading something. I love books like that.
Yeah.
It shows the care that was put into crafting them.
Definitely.
So Regal is again trying to say, oh, no. He's just making it up. And Queen Kettricken walks in, Queen in waiting. Although Fitz here addresses her as Queen Kettricken, or at least mentions her in his head, or this writing as Queen Kettricken. She's in a pretty much a battle uniform for her.
Yes.
Short white fur jacket, purple trousers, and boots. I'm pretty sure that's the same outfit she had when she was riding and escaping the Forged Ones.
Yes, when she went out hunting the Forged Ones.
And when she went out hunting them, or at least the same kind of outfit.
Right. And also she has a large mountain sword on her hip, does it say?
Yep, was at her side.
Yeah. And which is interesting because later we know that she fights dual-handed with the sword. So I can't imagine, she must be really tall if that big of a sword is just on her hip. NBD. Like, I don't know. That's crazy. She's so cool.
She spoke as one would to a spoiled child. Go back to your guests. I will ride to Neatbay. I forbid it. Regal's voice rang out strangely shrill. Stillness suddenly flooded the room. Queen Kettricken pointed out quietly what everyone in the room already knew. A prince does not forbid the queen in waiting. I ride tonight. Regal's face purpled. This is a hoax, a plot of the bastards to throw Buckkeep into an uproar and instill fear in the folk. There has been no word of an attack on Neatbay. And again, right there, he is so over defending his stance that no one should ride out to them. There has been no message.
Yeah.
Because he knows it hinges on them getting aid or not.
Right. Also, it's very interesting that he's not being more forceful with Kettricken, which I am sure stems from the fact that his father is somewhat cognizant right now, and he cannot be as horrible as I'm sure he would like to be at the moment.
Yeah.
Because he is, not great.
And speaking of Shrewd, he chimes in and says, "Silence. Fitz chivalry? Release that man. Fitz chivalry, stand before me. Report. Whence came your news?" Fitz straightens himself up a little bit and says pretty much exactly what Chade told him to.
By the way, he's barefoot at this moment.
Yes.
So he's standing there with his hair not in its warrior's tail. It's just uncombed around him, barefoot. At least he's wearing real clothes, not pajamas. And he's like, well, I had a dream of the pock man scrying into a bowl. And everyone just looks at him like, what?
I dared emphasize no word. I stood firm before them. One of the guardsmen snorted in disbelief. Burrich's jaw dropped open and his eyes widened. Kettricken merely looked confused. On the bed, King Shrewd closed his eyes and breathed out slowly, which is hilarious to me. King Shrewd is probably like, "Oh my God, Fitz, why?"
You couldn't think of anything else. Nothing else sounded more believable than your stupid dream that I now have to act on.
It's just like a sitcom moment where there's just a silence, jaws drop open, and then Regal's like, "Well, he's drunk. Get him out of here."
You know, Regal, if they would have panned to him in this little mini sitcom moment, he's like about to laugh because he's so excited.
He's the Dwight looking in the camera smirking, just like, I got away with something.
He's so excited. Clearly he's drunk. So why would we be listening to him?
I had never heard so much satisfaction in Regal's voice.
His job just got 10 times easier.
Yes. But the king says, he drew a deep breath in, obviously fighting pain. I commanded. He found a bit of strength. As I commanded. Go now. Now! I jerked my arms free of the astonished guards. Yes, your majesty, I said into the silence. I spoke clearly for the benefit of all. That is, all warships dispatched to Neatbay and as many of the fishing fleet as can be rallied. And all available horse to be sent overland under Kerf's command. Yes, the king sighed the word. He swallowed, took a breath, opened his eyes. Yes, I order it so. Now go. And Fitz does the smart thing there, repeats all of the commands that he got from the king earlier when no one else was present.
Yes.
And the king affirmed them, and thankfully the king got the very obvious hint.
Yes. I just like to think that Chade is listening, like hitting his forehead, like, come on, Fitz. I didn't literally mean say it was a dream. Like,
but also Chade's probably like, okay, it's Fitz.
Like, at least it worked, I guess.
Yes. I guess I did say it, so I can't really blame him.
Yeah. Oh, poor Fitz. But it does work. And Regal is upset because now Kettricken is saying, all right, let's ride and get changed, Fitz. And Regal says, the king did not tell you to go, he sputtered at her, nor did he forbid it. The queen looked at him flatly. And everybody's like, whoa, okay, Kettricken.
Her guard comes up to her and is ready to go and says, we're ready. Like, are you? And she makes some final preparations, asks Burrich if her horse is going to be ready, everything like that. And says to Burrich and Fitz that I want you two to catch up, basically, because we're going to go right now.
Mm-hmm. So while they're getting ready, they go to Fitz's room. Burrich he helps himself to some of Fitz's winter garments, which I made a special note of because that means that they're about the same size right now.
I think it's mentioned earlier that Fitz is actually taller than Burrich right now.
Yeah. But it's like so weird because it's this little, in my mind, Fitz is still kind of a kid, you know, but he's like 17. He's probably mostly full grown at this point.
We've talked about it before, actually, where we both thought Burrich was some like large, imposing man, and then the descriptions of him in the first book when we were rereading and going over it is that he wasn't particularly large, but he had an imposing presence.
Yeah,
and that is Robin Hobb does a great job of really showing that in all of the text, and then all of a sudden you get these little things. Fitz stood taller than Burrich. Burrich's helping him into Fitz's clothes. Like,
yeah,
it's just kind of wild.
It is. It's super weird because Fitz, you know, when we first meet him, Fitz is really small. So, of course, he's this big, burly, buff dude. But now he's just another guardsman, I guess, technically in build. He's not specifically big and bulky or huge. He's just Fitz's dad.
So they get ready and they go down, and Burrich takes command without even really realizing it. He's sending out orders, he's gathering people together, and all of a sudden he kind of looks uncomfortable as they're mounting up, and Fitz just looks over to him and says, "Experience counts."
Which, this is so interesting because not that long ago, in fact, this book at the beginning, Burrich was condemning Fitz for taking command and acting in charge.
Yeah.
And now he's embarrassed that he took that away from Fitz. It's only been a year, 2, and he's already like, oh no, Fitz should be taking power. He should be ordering people around. And it's so interesting to see that change in just a short amount of time.
Yeah, because I think in that time, Burrich and Fitz in his head realized that Burrich treats him as a man grown now. He talks to him straight across. He doesn't try to tell him what to do with his life anymore. He just gives advice as like a man to a man thing. And he mentioned that in one of the scenes where they met each other in the Great Hall at one point after a meal.
Yeah.
And that really does show in little scenes like this, as you mentioned, that since Fitz has grown up now, he has come into his own. He is talking to the king every day. He's higher than Burrich in the little totem pole there. And so Burrich's embarrassed that he took control. And we see it later in this chapter as well. Burrich like we've mentioned, he has self-esteem issues with what he's capable of and what he should be doing.
Right.
And he's kind of thrust into command later on. And he enjoys that, but he also knows in his head, like, I shouldn't be doing any of this. Or at least he thinks that.
Right.
I'm just a stable master who doesn't have a stable right now.
Right. It reminds me a little bit of Verity in this like complex of I can't do it as well as somebody else could, just to a lesser extent, because where Verity would complain the whole time and be like, I'm not the best one for the job, Burrich just does it and is like, well, I guess I'm what they have, and then does it to the best of his abilities, which I think is the big difference between the two of them. But also maybe the difference because one is helping fight against a small group and the other is ruling an entire kingdom. And also Verity was raised to be not in charge his whole life. Burrich kind of was raised that way too because he was a slave on and off, but I don't know.
I see them as slightly different because while they do have differing, responsibilities, Verity's are much bigger than Burrich's responsibilities. But anything that Burrich knows he can do well, fighting, animal care, healing, he seems to take control like right away and is fine doing that and is kind of embarrassed like you mentioned, but he is fine doing it to the best of his ability because he knows he's good. Verity is forced into doing so many other things that he'll complain all the time. And he's like, I'm just not the best person for this. And Burrich is much more willing to step back and be like, I don't know what I'm talking about. There are better people than me out there. Right. They are higher than me on the totem pole. They can handle this
I suppose, issue. Yeah. Maybe that's just the difference of being king in waiting versus just like a high up guard. But I don't even know if I'd call him a guard.
Right. No one really knows what Burrich is. But I really do like your comparison between Verity and Burrich because I feel like Verity would be the same level as Burrich if he wasn't in the royal family. Yeah. He would literally just be like the go-to map maker and strategy guy, maybe. Go along, maybe like a scout or something. Go along on the soldiers and be scouting around, have the maps. I could just totally see him doing that.
I wonder, too, if it's a difference of Burrich doesn't really seem to need outside approval to know that he's doing a good job.
Yeah.
He can tell when he's doing a good job, and he takes pride in it. Not that Verity doesn't, but I think Verity is a type of person who has to have constant validation, and he just never gets that.
Yeah.
And that is what really hurts him. I bet if he had somebody older than him, because Fitz obviously is like
chivalry around.
Right. He would be much better. So that is an interesting point, too, that they just are different personalities.
Mm-hmm. So Burrich and Fitz are trying to catch up. They head towards the gates and they're stopped. Of course, Fitz is still not allowed out. Burrich doesn't really know this, or at least he hasn't seen it in action yet.
Mm-hmm.
And the guardsman stops him and says, "You may pass, sir," he told Burrich respectfully, "but I have orders that the bastard is not allowed out of Buckkeep." The bastard? I'd never heard such outrage in Burrich's voice. "Say Fitz Chivalry, son of Prince Chivalry." The man gaped at him in astonishment. "Say it now," Burrich bellowed and pulled steel. He suddenly seemed twice as large as he had. Anger radiated from him in waves I could feel. "Fitz Chivalry, son of Prince Chivalry," the man babbled. He took a breath and swallowed. "But however I call him, I have my orders. He is not allowed out." They have a little discussion of Burrich saying, "What, do your orders supersede the queen in waiting who told us to catch up with her?"
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "One moment," and runs into the guardhouse away.
Right. Let me go get the manager. Which thankfully the manager is there now. But he does something I don't like, which is the manager comes out. He's not a manager. I just keep saying that. The head guard comes out and smiles and says, "Okay, you can go," which is so shady. And you just know they're going to have trouble getting back in. But
really? You thought this was like shady?
I thought it was shady. Yeah.
Huh.
You thought it was friendly?
Yeah.
You thought after the guard previous was referring to him only as the bastard,
yes,
that his supervisor likes Fitz?
100%. The older guards or the older captains will definitely know Burrich. Burrich was a soldier. He was in them. He is very well respected. And seeing a young kind of guard getting dressed down by Burrich or something, running off, leaving the two people he was supposed to keep there alone, and then having them like, "Hey, can you deal with Burrich?" I think it's 100% like hilarious and great for that guard to be like, "Yeah, go ahead." I didn't see any weird things about that at all.
I think I'm just so in the conspiracy of Regal has men everywhere that
I think he does, and I think they might be getting to that guard that like called him the bastard or whatever.
Right.
But I don't think it's fully infected the whole watch command yet, because this is the captain of the watch.
Interesting. Okay.
So I feel like this person would have had to be there for a while.
That's a good interesting thing. It's so funny how little things like this always pop up where it's like, "Oh yeah, I am 100% sure that it's this way," and then the other person will be like, "Absolutely not."
Because he also said, the captain of the guard comes out and says, well, he grinned at us. "Ride well and best of luck at Neatbay." So I think like he knows what's happening and the importance of everything, and is just like,
right.
Hey.
Huh. I don't know why. I just read it as like a good luck.
Well, let us know what you guys think. Do you think he is friendly, or do you think he's really sinister in this? I hope you die at Neatbay.
Maybe not that far, but I don't know.
Wow, I've never read it as that. That's interesting. You're too in the conspiracy.
I am. I got my tinfoil hat on always.
They're starting to catch up to Kettricken and Queen Kettricken's guard, and they stop before they quite get there and announce themselves by raising their hand, and they're greeted, and so they ride in slowly. But Burrich has I thought this was a really fun moment too, that shows Burrich's concern, but also his complete naivety in certain things.
Mm-hmm.
It says, "A pregnant mare in early pregnancy does well to be exercised." He looked over at me through the darkness. I don't know that much about women, he said hesitantly. I grinned at him. And you think I do? I shook my head and grew sober. I don't know. Some women don't ride at all when they are carrying. Some do. I think Kettricken would not put Verity's child at risk. Besides, she is safer with us than left behind with Regal. Burrich said nothing, but I sensed his assent. It was not all I sensed. And Nighteyes comes up.
Mm-hmm. But no, it is really cute. Horses are good in their first trimester to exercise, so obviously women are probably similar, right?
But I don't know that much. He looks at Fitz like, I don't know either. Don't look at me.
The 17-year-old? Yeah, good going, Burrich. I'm sure he knows more.
But they are concerned with Kettricken exerting herself and everything like that too. But yeah, Nighteyes shows up and communicates openly with Fitz because Nighteyes is excited. He's still pretty much a puppy. He's only been around for maybe a year, you know? And he talks to him because he hasn't met with Fitz for a while. And they have a little conversation, and Burrich stiffens slightly in his saddle. I knew Nighteyes was off the side of the road, trotting through the shadows. It did feel good to be out and alongside him again. I glanced over at Burrich. Anger radiated from him. Burrich? I ventured. It's a wolf, isn't it? Burrich spoke grudgingly into the darkness. He looked straight ahead as we rode. I knew this out of his mouth. You know I am. A grinning, tongue-lolling reply. Burrich flinched as if poked. Nighteyes, I admitted quietly, rendering the image of his name into human words. Dread sat at me. Burrich had sensed him. He knew. No point in denying anything anymore. But there was a tiny edge of relief in it as well. I was deathly tired of all the lies I lived. Burrich rode on silently, not looking at me. I did not intend for it to happen. It just did. An explanation, not an apology. I gave him no choice. Nighteyes was being very jocular about Burrich's silence. He goes on to say that, I know you'll never approve, but it's not something I can choose. It's what I am. And Nighteyes says, it's what we all are. Come, heart of pack, speak to me. Will not we hunt well together? And so we learn Burrich's name.
Yeah. This is an interesting section because we're reminded right after a great father-son joking bonding moment that there is this tension between them.
Yeah.
Because Fitz lives a lifestyle that Burrich disagrees with. And it hasn't really come to the forefront because Fitz has been keeping it a secret and it hasn't really had a reason to come out before now. They don't typically ride outside of Buckkeep walls together where a wolf could be hiding. So I don't know. It's really interesting to read the progression of Fitz because he's not really upset that Burrich knows, at least not in like a sad, depressed way.
No, he's anxious about it.
Right. He doesn't want Burrich to cut him out again.
Right.
But there's definitely finally I don't have to keep this from him anymore. But also, I'm not going to apologize for this. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really beautiful, just the maturity in that. Even if Fitz isn't mature about everything,
he's learning to accept himself a little bit, or at least take a stand on what he believes in.
Mm-hmm. And it seems to go over better, even though things are cut off right now. And later we know he's a little bit more positive. He still doesn't fully approve, but at least in this moment, Burrich isn't like, never speak to me again, I hate you. There's no, I don't ever want to see you again, I'm never talking to you again. There's just anger, which is a big step because I feel like if this had happened earlier, then
or under different circumstances than riding to protect a town.
Yeah, he would immediately be like, okay, never talk to me again then.
You betrayed my trust for a second time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're done.
But I think also Burrich might be letting it go a little because Fitz is number one older, so it's not a child bonding to an animal.
Yeah.
But number two, he knows Fitz's life is in danger. And if he cuts Fitz out, who's going to protect him? Verity's gone. He doesn't know about Chade. King Shrewd is clearly very ill. And I'm sure he sees himself as the last line of defense for Fitz. And I think that's also partially why he doesn't want to let Fitz go. Before, if he cut Fitz out, it didn't really matter because he could still watch over Fitz, and also Fitz would probably be fine. But now if he takes away this one outlet Fitz has, it could be disastrous, and I think he realizes that.
Yeah, I think he's also in his head thinking back on conversations he had with Verity, because all three of them together, we figured that Burrich might possibly guess that Fitz had bonded again because of the claw marks and things that had happened in the fight with the Forged Ones in the woods with the little girl. And Verity saying, whatever he has, let him use it to stay alive and fight for our kingdom. So I feel like Burrich had to kind of reconcile that Fitz probably bonded again. And this is just confirmation. So a lot of the initial anger might have died a little bit in that time in between these instances.
I guess. And if that's the case, then it probably helps that he's seen Fitz living a normal life and not constantly being away. He's keeping his life up. And that's really the most important thing to Burrich, is that he doesn't become a beast.
Right.
And
so Fitz asks Nighteyes, heart of the pack, I wondered. He knows it is his name. It is what they called him. All those dogs that worshipped him when they all gave tongue in the chase. It is what they taunted one another with. Heart of the pack, here, the game is here, and I have found it for you. So they all yelped and tried to be the first to yelp it to him. But now they are all gone, taken far away. They did not like to leave him. They knew he heard, even if he would not reply. Had you never heard them? I suppose I tried not to. A waste. Why choose to be deaf or mute? Must you do this in my presence? Burrich's voice was stiff. Beg pardon, I said, gravely aware that he was truly offended. Nighteyes snickered again. I ignored him.
Nighteyes is so ornery.
Yeah. He just really likes to poke at anything. It's like, this is what it is.
He's so spirited. He's got a great personality, which is so funny because when I think of Nighteyes, I think more of older Nighteyes, where he's like, let's slow down and go with the flow, and why do you always have to be worried about everything? And young Nighteyes is so, I'm gonna make fun of you.
But he's also really like, in that attitude, it also comes from this is what it is, let's just live in the moment, because he doesn't see anything wrong with it. He's like, why would you ignore him?
Yeah. Yeah.
So he doesn't really know it's that bothering to Burrich.
I think he knows he's bothering Burrich.
Yeah.
I think he's okay with that fact.
They catch up with Queen Kettricken, and Burrich formally reports to her what has happened, and they trek on to Neatbay. He kind of recalls that years earlier he had made the trip to Neatbay as part of Verity's entourage, and that's Neatbay with Lady Grace and Duke Kelvar, and Lady Grace's little feist dog that he saved with the lard. With the fat.
And he notes that the last time he came to Neatbay, it took 5 days, but that was because they were part of a big caravan. There were lots of carts and people, and now they go as soldiers, not sticking strictly to roads. So it takes them a full 2 days, and when they get there, the fighting is still going on.
And there's still winter storms that were happening.
Right.
And it's just miserable weather.
Yeah.
So they are coming upon this field. They notice what has been happening, and the fight is still going on. Outer defense lines have been broken at Bayguard, and they're up against the keep with worked stone walls, and everyone's kind of commenting they can hold out here for a long time because it's just going to be a siege. The Red Ship Raiders can't tear down these walls.
Right. It says, once I had been told that no enemy had ever made it past the second wall, it was no longer true. So they're at least at the third wall.
Yeah.
Which is worked stone that took a really long time to build. So this is much more sturdy. Even though the other walls were also sturdy, they were
earthenworks,
Yes.
probably some wood walls, things like that.
Yeah, they were still breakable in a somewhat easy way, but typically they don't get attacked in the middle of winter when they're not expecting it. So I'm sure that is partially why they also got so far, or maybe just the amount of men that they had to attack with. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
So Foxglove, who is the captain of the Queen's Guard, we've mentioned her before, kind of goes on a little discussion of what's happening with the Red Ship Raiders and why this attack doesn't make sense, because they've left themselves extremely vulnerable to any aid that the Six Duchies might bring against them. They've basically parked too high up, so when the tide goes out, their ships will be, stranded, or they'll be stranded where they are. They've have no watchers on their back. The ships aren't very well protected. It's like this attack doesn't make sense, and it's like they expected no aid at all.
And Kettricken says that's probably what it is.
Yeah.
They probably didn't expect anyone to come. They have the town to pillage for supplies, and perhaps other ships are expected. I have no battle experience, she said simply. You two will have to plan this. I listen now as a soldier. What should we do next?
I saw Burrich wince. Such honesty is admirable, but not always good leadership. Which is true. There's still things. We talk about Kettricken coming into her own as a leader, and she is fantastic and a natural leader, and not just a natural, but she's been taught things in the Mountain Kingdom and raised by fantastic leaders. But she doesn't know full tact. She's very direct in certain things.
Right.
And especially concerning the Six Duchies court, letting your subordinates know that, I don't know what to do here, you figure it out, isn't the best way to go about things.
Right. I think it's more of a cultural difference.
Probably,
though.
yeah.
I mean, it is really good for her to say, I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't want to lead us into failure for my own pride. So I'm allowing you to speak with your experience, because that's probably how it is in the Mountain Kingdom. If you have experience on something, you take over that.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who you are. And here, it's all about rank. And so when the queen is like, I don't know, they're like, I don't know. Are we allowed to do this?
Yeah, it would probably be much better if she had went in and said, let's strategize of what to do. What do you suggest? Right. And then, she would make the final decision, but under the guise of gathering information from other people.
Right.
So Kerf and Foxglove turn to each other and they're like, well, I don't really have much experience. Do you? I don't know what I'm doing.
I don't want to do it. You do it.
Yeah.
No, you do it. So everybody passes it off to Burrich.
Yeah. Burrich was chivalry's man. He has seen far more battles than I have. He observed to his mare's neck. He looked up suddenly. I commend him to you, my queen. So obviously they're kind of embarrassed about this.
Right.
They're I don't really know what I'm doing
Kerf
either.
Is I don't know. Burrich knows.
Burrich's face was a struggle of conflicting emotions. For a moment, his eyes lit. Then I saw hesitation build. Heart of the pack, they will hunt well for you, Nighteyes urged him. Burrich, take command. They will fight with heart for you. My skin prickled to hear Queen Kettricken virtually echo Nighteyes' thought. From where I sat, I could actually see a shiver run over Burrich. He straightened in his saddle.
Do you think, on a subconscious level, she heard Nighteyes?
I think so, or at least the general sentiment of it.
Right.
Because she does that a couple more times later, I think in the next book, when they're hunting together, and she just kind of knows.
Right. And I think I remember her saying something along the lines of, almost, I think I can hear him speaking.
Yeah.
In the next book when they're in the mountains. So I just wonder if I wonder if she knows, if she thinks it's just my intuition says to say this.
I think it's something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
And that inner struggle is kind of what we were talking about before with Burrich, of how his eyes light up first, because, yeah, he does have experience. I'm sure he did plenty of this with chivalry. It reminds him of a better time. He knows he's good at it. Mm-hmm. But then there's that hesitation of well, I'm the lowest ranked one in this circle right now. What am I doing here besides just guarding the queen at night? do I do this? And then Nighteyes and the Queen say the same thing pretty much, and he gets a shiver over him. He's like, well, my queen commanded me. I'll straighten up and I'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes up with a good plan. I'm not a strategy expert, so I'm not really going to go over everything, but
no, he basically says there's no way to surprise the people because they're on flat land. Mm-hmm. So what they want to do is split in half. There are 5 boats on the beach, and then the rest of the people seem to be down the way around the fort. The castle, I don't know if it...
Yeah, Bayguard.
Yeah.
Or whatever, Buckkeep or whatever it is called.
So he suggests that they send some people to deal with whoever was left behind with the boats, because clearly they're not going to leave nobody there.
Yep.
And hold the boats so we can take them as our own ships. And then everybody else needs to go wait at wherever they got in, because once they realize what's going on, that's probably where they're going to exit.
Yep, and they're just watching the wall that they're using the wall that the red ship raiders broke past as a wall to pen them in and keep them there, because they could siege them out. They can stop them from doing anything. So they have a bunch of archers and watchers along the whole wall. And
Burrich recommends that everybody stay back. They don't want hand-to-hand combat. There's not very many of them, and there's a lot more of the red ship raiders. So try to keep them at a distance so that more people survive, and just in general, they want to make sure that they have the best way to keep everything at hand until more help comes.
Yep, until all the ships come. Mm-hmm. Which surprises me that... it almost surprises me that the people over land got there faster than by ship. Mm-hmm. But I haven't looked at a map to see like if there's a huge peninsula kind of blocking. Plus, it probably takes a while to get crew and the ships ready to go rather than horses. So
there is like an island. I mean, it's off the shore, and I don't know if they'd have to go around it or not. I think they could swim between, but it's just up north, like straight north. So
it's a good plan, and Fitz goes with the swords against the ships.
Oh, wait, sorry. I was looking at Seal Bay, not Neatbay. Neatbay is directly south, and there's like a weird
thought it was south
area. So
very descriptive.
It's like a U shape in the land where it like dips in closer to the land and then goes back out to a point. Okay. And so they're both on points at either side of the U.
Okay.
If that helps your mind.
So ships could sail straight across, but by land they would have to kind of go around the edge.
Well, they couldn't go straight across because there's an island at the top of the U. So like a U with a tilde
it would take them a little bit longer, possibly. Okay. So Burrich's plan is basically to pen them in, capture the ships, and then wait for reinforcements to arrive to finally take care of all these raiders. Mm-hmm. And Fitz goes along with the crew against the ships. And they start to see their own ships arrive, actually.
Yeah.
Someone gives a cry that the Burrich is there, so they're kind of arriving at the same time.
On their way, they're stopped because, obviously, like Burrich predicted, they saw them coming, so people are retreating. And they have to stop to help free the prisoners that they have with them. So they split up into even smaller groups, separate a group to help the people who were tied up to let them free, and the other to go towards the boat to make sure none leave.
Right, yeah. And as they're doing this, and as they spot the Burrich coming in, Fitz sees the white ship.
Yes.
And calls it out, and Burrich's like, what? Where? And he looks back, and there's just a bank of fog.
So this is an interesting point. Burrich specifically does not see this white ship.
Yeah, I was thinking about this too.
And we know Burrich cannot be affected by the skill. Mm-hmm. So either this is...
Directly.
Yeah. But either this is a contingency problem, or Fitz is really imagining things.
Consistency problem? Or like a plot hole thing? Or okay.
Is that not... What's the word I'm looking for? Consistency? No, that doesn't feel right either. Whatever, it does not matter.
It doesn't matter.
But
I think it's more so because if you assume that it's the same powers as Vindelier or whatever from the last trilogy, where he's directly touching everybody's mind to make them believe something else. I don't think that's what's happening, because that requires a lot of power, and it's not as wide of an area as Keble Rawbread seems to be doing.
Right.
So I feel like it's just a different power entirely, where he's creating this fog of bank mirage, or like masking the ship somehow. Not touching everybody's minds, but like doing something to the ship itself.
I don't know, because I think no matter what, you're scaling into somebody's head. Even if you're not directly looking at that person specifically, it's still touching your brain. And I think that's like a weird loophole. But I suppose maybe that is what it is. But it just feels like a weird slippery slope loophole of, so I could generally think to everybody in the area, kill this person, and somebody who is protected from the skill would still do it.
Yeah, we don't know enough of Keble Rawbread's capabilities, of like what he's good at, because we know Verity is good at tightening his control and very minute things, but he's very powerful. But we just don't know what Keble Rawbread's good at. Right,
but it shouldn't matter what he's good at, because Burrich has been closed off completely.
But that's what I'm saying. We don't know if this is a different power that works differently from things that we have seen, because we're basing all of our knowledge of like what's possible with what Fitz knows.
That's fair. That's very fair.
And that's literally nothing. So there's whole scrolls that they never get back from the skill scroll collection that they had at Buckkeep before. So this could be something that they learned from the scrolls that we don't find out.
That's fair. That's a good point.
Or this could be Robin Hobb doing this and not realizing she would still expand upon the series yet.
Fair. Or that it would ever become a plot point. Right. Nobody's going to remember.
Right.
Except for those jerks that make the podcast.
And so he sees the white ship, calls it out, and everyone only sees a fog bank. Fitz looks back, and he only sees the fog bank now, too. And they split their forces up. They go after these ships because their reinforcements are coming back in.
Right. And Burrich says that he and Fitz need to be at the bank to tell the captains what to do next.
Yeah, what's happening on and what they're planning on doing, so no confusion happens.
Yeah.
And so quickly they charge down to the beach. They start to go after the raiders. One ship gets away pretty cleanly. They capture, a couple more ships. Some of them even they're able to free prisoners before they're killed or cast off. It's relatively clean of how they capture the beach.
Right. There is one trigger-happy archer who sets a sail ablaze a little too early.
Yeah.
One ship gets away.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest, so 3 technically, ships are completely taken.
And so Fitz in his mind is thinking about what is happening here, because they're loading these red ships with prisoners. It's not just them being guarded and waiting for the attacking forces to come back. Mm-hmm. They are loading prisoners up, and they were going to ferry them out. And so he's thinking, where are those prisoners going to go? What happened? Was the ship that I saw like actually where they were bringing them? And it's definitely true that is where they were going to bring them.
Yeah, no. And he saves all this information away for Chade because he knows Chade's going to want to know. And it's very important. Maybe Chade will have more insight and be able to tell what the insight is, like what the planning here was.
There's too much that he has to think about right now with the fighting. So they had secured all the ships by the time the Burrich was beached, and there was time now to lift his head and to look out over Neatbay. No sign of the white ship. Perhaps it had only been a cloud bank. Behind the Burrich came the Constance, and behind them a flotilla of fishing vessels and even a couple of merchant ships. Most of them had to anchor out in the shallow harbor, but the men aboard them were ferried swiftly ashore. The warship crews waited for their captains to hear word of what went on, but those from the fishing vessels and merchant ships swept past us and headed directly for the besieged keep. And so they kind of set up shop.
Mm-hmm.
Basically just watch everything, pen them in, wait to starve them out, and they'll eventually kill all the attackers.
Right. Burrich tells people to leave at least one ship manned because they'll probably be back. And he's right. 2 more ships come and attack the other side of where they were previously, and they're able to counterattack because they had the Rurisk armed.
Yeah.
There are people watching.
And there's not even fighting. They just kind of run. The red ships just run. Which
doesn't make anyone feel good because they know that means they're probably just going down the lake a little, or
down the coast.
Yeah, down the coast to besiege some other helpless town.
Right. And so the weather turns bad again. There's storms coming in. Food's not great because they left in a hurry. They're just kind of waiting. All was still and waiting. And then Burrich and Fitz have a time to have another discussion. You don't listen to warnings. You never have, Burrich spoke quietly to me. And they're watching all of the guards kind of bustle in and around Queen Kettricken's tent, and they're just familiarly going in and out and having a good time, and Burrich kind of comments on that. Your father, too, was like that, he observed suddenly, as 2 of Kettricken's guard emerged from her shelter and went to relieve others still on watch. Didn't take warnings? I asked in surprise. Burrich shook his head. No, always his soldiers, coming and going at all hours. I've always wondered when he found the privacy to create you. I must have looked shocked, for Burrich suddenly flushed as well. Sorry, I'm tired and my leg is uncomfortable. I wasn't thinking what I was saying. I found a smile unexpectedly. It's all right, I said, and it was. When he found out about Nighteyes, I was afraid he was going to banish me again. A jest, even a rough jest, was welcome. You were saying about warnings? I asked humbly. He sighed. You said it. We are as we are. And he said it. Sometimes they don't give you a choice. They just bond to you. And this, I know I had my theory on Vixen with Burrich of how she was bonded to him, but he didn't refused all contact. But it must have been a full joining then. But I don't know how that could be, because Burrich would have to willingly reach out and bond. Or if she just, since he was in the stables and she was around, she literally just chattered in his head all day. Even if they didn't have that mutual moment where they joined as a bond, he just ignored her. I don't know.
There could be rules that he set that make him feel that it's different.
Yeah.
He could have said, I will not talk to you. And maybe he did sometimes talk to her if he had too much to drink, or maybe just after a really long day. But maybe he did it out loud and it made him feel better. Because it's not that weird for a stable guy to be talking out loud to animals. I feel like I talk out loud all the time, no matter what. So if there's an animal there, people wouldn't be
even
that
better.
Weirded out. Yeah. I don't think, you know what I mean? I don't think it would seem that weird. And I think maybe Burrich creates little lines like that where he needs a boundary on things. And if he tells himself it's different because he set these rules, then it's different, even though it's really not. Because
he's not giving in to the magic or anything like that. Right. He's not sharing his life as he feels.
Right.
Blocking them out. He's a troubled and very conflicted man. And it does show with his relationship with the Wit and with Fitz. They go on to continue this conversation a little bit, and Fitz admits that he can't control Nighteyes at all. Nighteyes says, nor I you. Why should there be control, one of the other? Nor does he stay out of personal conversations, I observed. Nor personal anything, Burrich said flatly. He spoke in the voice of a man who knew.
So when I read this part, I made a little note because I immediately thought about what happened with Molly.
Yeah.
And all of the things, Nighteyes not seeming to understand boundaries in the bedroom.
Or understanding people.
Yeah, understanding just the way people work. And it made me wonder about Burrich and Patience.
Burrich was not bonded at that time.
Do we know that for a fact?
Vixen was not around, and that was after his other Wit partner, the horse, I believe, and him had split up or the horse had died. So this was when he was with Chivalry, and he credits Chivalry with straightening him out and teaching him how to be a man, and he was very strict with himself after that, after he met with Chivalry and became Chivalry's man. So
you're 100% confident there's no way he had a wit partner when he first met Patience?
I am going to say that it's 99% confident, unless Vixen was alive. But I don't think he was. The stable master and Vixen would have to be at least 20 years old, at least, when she passed away. I think the only partners that he's had are the stray dog when he was a kid, that horse afterwards, and then Vixen.
Interesting.
You were thinking that if he did, something might have happened, that he wanted to distance himself from Patience.
Right.
Because of that?
Right. Like maybe he didn't want to share her, and the only way he could figure out how to get away from sharing her is by just not having her.
Yeah.
Because she didn't deserve to be dirtied like that. And his
it's a good parallel to Fitz and Molly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great parallel. I just don't think that at the position that we know Burrich was in at that point, he would have bonded or been able to bond, because he was traveling around with Chivalry a lot, and he wasn't at the stables the whole time.
Right.
At that point. He was working with horses, but I don't think he was the stable master.
Right. I don't know. I just thought maybe that could be one of the reasons. Or maybe it was just the wit in general that played a part in him not wanting to marry Patience, just that he felt unworthy because of his dirty talent.
Yeah.
So he's like really rough on himself and Fitz about having this ability. Which is fair. There's a big stigma. He's only ever heard bad things said about it, and it brings literal death. So I get it. It's just really sad to see.
He expands a little bit here. Fitz asks, I thought you said you never used it. Even out here, I would not say the wit aloud. I don't. No good comes of it. I will tell you plainly now what I've told you before. It changes you. If you give in to it, if you live it, if you can't shut it out, at least don't seek after it. Don't become Burrich. And Foxglove is there. So obviously he's had traumatic experiences with it, and from what we find out later, and from what my shoddy memory here, I think when he was a child and he had bonded to the stray dog that taught him to live on the streets, he still had family, but he was becoming more and more wild-like until his mother died, and then his grandmother kind of like snapped it out of him, I guess.
Yeah.
Or like the dog died and he went back to his grandmother, and his grandmother straightened him out and told him about the wit and like, this is bad and everything like that. So I feel like some of those traumatic experiences really settled deep within Burrich. And that's where like it changes you. Like it led him further away from his family, I think, before his mother passed away. So I think that's where that comes from. But if he was bonded while seeing Patience, it could have been from that too. I don't know. That comment. Right.
I don't know. It's also, I mean, another child who is using the wit too young and in an uneducated way that seems dangerous.
Yeah.
And I wonder if Burrich too then has problems with the boundaries like Fitz does, that other old ones disapprove of so strongly. And that's where Burrich really falters, maybe. Like, I don't know if we know that he's been around old ones, but even if he sought them out, maybe he would also be shunned there for not using the wit right.
Right.
And so maybe it's just this feeling of ostracization that he doesn't really have a group to belong to because...
Could be.
Yeah. Some of it's self-imposed, but...
Like all of the troubles of the Farseer book boys.
Yes.
I do want to draw a parallel that we've talked about before, but I do kind of want to I don't know, put it in a different light. We might have spoken directly of this topic, but it's kind of coming up again, of how Fitz latches on to one person to give his attention to. And Burrich is the same exact way. He kind of has one duty and he can only do one thing. We see that with his decision with Patience. He latches on to Fitz then to give that. He needs someone to help in order to get over his grieving. He needs a purpose. He needs something to do. And I think both him and Fitz have the same thing, and that comes from bonding too young. Yeah. Because you have that deep connection with one thing, you're leading this soul life together, and then when you're separated, you didn't have that development to lead your own life, to make your own decisions, really. You've never had to be yourself. Yeah, and Fitz, when he is unpartnered, he's being directed around by the Farseer crown, or chasing after Dutiful, or something like that. He's never on his own, living in the cabin in the woods without a wit partner. Right. If he has a wit partner, he's fine and content doing nothing out somewhere else. Or if he dreams about that with Molly, he's fine doing nothing out somewhere with her. But being alone, I think, is an issue for them because of that attachment. That's a really interesting point. Yeah. Just kind of thought about that with talking about Burrich's past. Yeah. Weird. Kind of like how some dogs have separation anxiety. Yeah. My dog had real bad separation anxiety. He was a good pup. Lick the windows and... So Foxglove comes upon their little campfire conversation here, and they have a discussion about if Kettricken is pregnant or not. And Burrich and Fitz are rightly wary. They need to make sure that it's safe to talk to her about it. Foxglove, I don't know, how do I ask this? Are you aware she's pregnant? Burrich and I exchange glances. Who? He asked levelly. And then she points out, I have 2 children of my own, and most of her guard are women. Which is really funny, because I'm sure as a guy you wouldn't think about the fact that there are stages to pregnancy, and they're pretty obvious, especially if you, number one, have been through it yourself, and number 2, know all about it because you're a woman and you get told about it. She pukes every morning, lives off raspberry leaf tea. She can't even look at the saltfish without retching. She shouldn't be here living like this. And so they just kind of keep on with the conversation, acknowledging that both of them know that she is pregnant. And they discuss whether Kettricken should be there at all anymore. And they're like, well, we can't really tell her she can't. She's the queen in waiting. That's up to you, the captain of her guard, Foxglove. Right. And Foxglove's like, well, will you do it, though? And he's like, no, she's the queen. And then it's really interesting because she says, I haven't been keeping watch outside her door each night, trying to persuade Burrich to be the one to tell her. Yeah. And then Burrich responds with, perhaps you should have, Burrich said, then tempered it with a, now that you know. Which is a good point. She should have, even before she knew. Should have been keeping a watch on the door. Yeah. But I'm sure this comes... Foxglove is young, is she not? Am I misremembering? She's 2 kids. Fair. I just meant, like, in terms of service. Like, does she have a ton of experience? I think so, but this is different than Whistle that he talked to before. Right. And she was younger. Okay, so maybe I think Foxglove is probably... I mean, I'm obviously just ballparking, probably upper 20s to 30s, I would guess. Was Foxglove the, like, older woman who took over? Maybe. Like, she has grandkids. I know we've... No, does she? Somebody did. Well, there's lots of characters we don't know. So, yeah, I feel like we've talked about her before, and I don't know. She's at least old enough to have 2 kids. Right. Well, anyway, I was saying if she was younger, then it would explain why, number 1, she doesn't want to take charge, and 2, she didn't know better. But also, I don't know, because I can't remember, if she was ever, like, high up in the guards. I think she was one of them that wanted to split because the old guard, like the King's Guard, was just kind of stationary. There was no need to advance. So splitting them gave room for other people to move up. So she was probably sitting in a position of authority, but had been there for a while and like they weren't doing anything. So so she probably had been in charge of something. I don't think you would go from a common soldier to captain of the Queen's Guard without any accolades.
It just feels like a lack of experience that would lead you to not immediately be like, let's put guards on the doors.
Yeah.
So,
or Kettricken probably told him, like, I don't need guards.
That's fair.
Go guard the common people. I don't need guards here. I have my knife. Kettricken lovingly caresses it or something.
Yeah, right. She doesn't back down and says, who's going to escort her back? Because it's still in her mind that a pregnant woman should not be here, which is kind of fair. I mean, not that I think that if you're pregnant, you're incapable of doing anything, but
it is the heir to the throne, and you're just sitting in a siege, so you can leave. Like,
but
it's
also,
fine.
like, even if it wasn't, do you really want to risk death right now? And the stress of being in battle, I don't know. I'm not sure how much stress affects a baby in the first trimester, if at all. I know that, like, pregnant women are told not to do stressful things. Because I've never been pregnant, I don't really know what they tell you to do when you're pregnant or not do. I know that you're allowed to exercise up until the second trimester. I just don't... I don't know. It seems like an unnecessary risk is all I'm saying.
Yeah. And so there's a sudden outcry in the middle of this conversation, and Whistle comes up, speaking of Whistle, and starts reporting that a two-pronged attack at the breach just below the south tower. They tried to break out, and some got through at... An arrow swept through her and carried off forever what she had begun to tell us. OutIslanders were suddenly upon us, more of them than my mind could grasp, and all converging on the Queen's tent. To the Queen, I shouted, and had the slim comfort of hearing my cries taken up farther down the line. And so they're in the middle of a battle now. They get their swords, they're trying to rally to Kettricken, and she shouts, "Don't guard me, get to where the fighting is." "It's here, my lady," Burrich grunted and stepped forward suddenly to take off the arm of a man who had ventured too close. I remembered those words clearly, and I remember seeing Burrich take that stride. It is the last coherent memory I have of that night. After that, all was shouting and blood, metal and fire. Waves of emotions pounded against me as all around me, soldiers and raiders fought to the death. And again, we see that waves of emotions come over him during this battle because of the wit of receiving all of the anger, the adrenaline, the shock, the pain, the death, all just kind of pounding on Fitz.
Mm-hmm. Which might mean that Burrich has better walls. Because
he's lived all of his adult life blocking wit out, so I'm sure he's pretty good at it.
Right. It's
but
just
also Fitz, remember, he has the skill ability, and he can touch people's minds without knowing it because he doesn't have control over anything. So
that's a good point. It could partially
be enhanced.
Yeah. It's definitely really scary. And we see Kettricken, who is not fully... I don't want to say not fully clothed because she is covered completely. She's just in a robe and has tied up skirts, and she has bared legs and bare feet, and she's fighting on frozen ground. And she's cool.
She held her ridiculously long mountain sword in a two-handed grip. Her grace made a deadly dance of the battle that would have distracted me at any other time.
Yeah, she's pretty cool, I would say. Like in the middle of all these armed people just chilling with a sword.
Not really just chilling, because they are fighting for their lives at this point.
Yeah, but she proves that she is a strong warrior. Like, she doesn't have any preparation. She's just going at it and doing well.
OutIslanders continued to appear. At one point, I was sure I heard Verity shouting commands, which he probably did in his head, but like, he's berserking out. He can't really...
Right. I wonder too, though, if it's him saying it. Like, because it says he heard... I guess hearing... He could be hearing it in his mind.
I think it's Verity shouting in his mind to tell him what to do.
Right. But he doesn't shut Verity out.
Yeah.
Verity stays.
They've been practicing for a few months before Verity left, and
right.
it worked.
Surprisingly. For the first time ever.
Nighteyes started to appear from time to time, and he says, I was part of the circle that protected the queen. At least I thought I was until I realized she was actually fighting beside me. At some point, he just drops the sword to snatch up a fallen axe. He remarks later that he goes back to pick it up because it was Verity's gift to him, but at the time, he just dropped it for the better brawling weapon.
Right. And we start to see him descending into one with Nighteyes in this battle.
Yep.
It begins by saying, while we were fighting, there was only the now to consider, which is a very wolf-like thought.
When at last the tide of the battle turned, I did not consider the wisdom of it, but pursued and hunted scattered enemy throughout the night-black, fire-stinking wreckage of Neatbay village, which is also like a hunter thing to do. Like,
people wouldn't do that.
They're just going to hunt. Yeah, you would stay with your group. You would,
strategize.
Yeah.
And then we sank down and put our backs to the brick well to watch the sunrise beyond the thick ground mist. Nighteyes leaned warm against me, and we did not even think. I suppose I dozed a bit, for I was jostled alert as he quickly left me. I looked up to see what had startled him, only to discover a frightened Neatbay girl staring at me. The early sun struck glints off her red hair. A bucket was in her hand. I stood and grinned, lifting my axe in greeting, but she sheared off like a frightened rabbit among the ruined buildings. Just a dude.
Covered in blood?
Yeah, with a bloody axe. Also,
a wolf sitting beside him.
Isn't this the girl who... Doesn't she, like, tell Regal or something?
Maybe. Like, on, like, the trial kind of thing?
Yeah. That she saw him turn into man from wolf at the well.
Oh, yeah, that could definitely be true. I forgot about that, so I'm not sure.
I specifically remember somebody testifying that they saw him, he was a wolf, and then he turned into a man. Which, if he was leaning up against Nighteyes, and Nighteyes was sitting in the direction that the girl was walking, so she saw just Nighteyes, and then he ran away quickly, and all of a sudden there's Fitz jumping to his feet.
Yeah.
I could see how it could look like he
definitely
turned from a wolf into a man.
A little bit right before that description of the girl, you were reading a little bit, and it was saying we, because Fitz and Nighteyes pretty much merged together. Mm-hmm. Again, he described himself as becoming one with that, with Nighteyes, and experiencing the whole night as one entity. And Fitz says that the memories were too sharp, too red and black, and he pushed them down deep in his mind. Was this what Burrich had meant by his warning? And it is, kind of. Mm-hmm. Burrich was warning him about more than just experiences like that, but that is a start. You don't want to be merged into one thing. You want to keep yourself a little bit separate because you are individuals.
Right.
You're not trying to join together to create, an amalgamation. I don't know what they call the people who join it together in one body. The old blood call them, but like those cursed things that don't look quite animal-like.
Their eyes are too human.
It'd just be creepy.
Yeah.
The OutIslanders had tried to break through the siege, but to Fitz's mind that they had directly tried to attack the Queen's tent was not comprehensible at all. And Burrich tries to rationalize that, saying, perhaps they did not hope to escape. It is their OutIslander way to decide to die, and then attempt to do as much damage before doing so. So they attacked here, hoping to kill our queen. He had met, while they have this conversation, they're walking back to Baygard, and Burrich had met Fitz out in the field walking around, and while Burrich didn't say it, by his relief, Fitz kind of realizes he was looking around for Fitz's body.
Yeah.
And so obviously he's relieved, and they're having this conversation on the way back.
And Fitz points out, how did they know it was the Queen's tent?
No banners, no challenges, nothing. And he kind of points out that there's more OutIslanders than there should have been.
Right. For just
the 5 ships. So they're not going to ferry people, drop them off, go back to where they were and drop them off. There has to be a bigger ship carting soldiers in.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, he goes back to the white ship in his head. Burrich has a little cute story about how everyone is in Bayguard and what happened when they walked in. How Duke Kelvar got to Queen Kettricken's feet, kneeled, kissed her hand, and Lady Grace looked at her and said, "Oh, my dear, I shall have a bath drawn for you at once." They say that everyone's celebrating, and it must be what happens in the future, with the girl, because again, Fitz mentions like, no, not everybody's there. I saw a girl in town.
Mm-hmm.
So that must be the same kind of evidence that Regal gathers.
Right. And Burrich does point out that not everyone is probably in a joyous mood because there was a fight.
Yeah, there's a ton of death. Mm-hmm. They didn't just run to the keep to begin with. They fought through each layer first. They fought through each layer of wall and protection that they had, and then eventually retreated. So
Fitz goes and gets cleaned off. Everybody is, cleaning up and getting ready for the celebratory dinner. And they stay for 3 days. It says, during this time, our dead were buried and the bodies of the OutIslanders were burned, which I wanted to point out because I thought burning the dead was an honor and they don't bury people here. So I was very confused at this because there's that whole thing where they burned all the forged ones before. And now they're burning the OutIslanders who are their enemy. I don't know.
I don't remember if they talked about the burning of the forged ones as an honor itself, or if that was just like, it's better to burn all the forged ones because we don't know what disease they have, and it's...
Well, it said that they were burning them in the honor of a soldier. I thought the whole point was that it was honorable and a soldier's pyre.
I don't know.
Like they built special
stuff
not sure.
just
for it. Which you'd have to do anyway because bodies need a lot of heat to burn.
Yeah. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I only know that because I don't even know why I know that. I don't burn people's bodies in my backyard.
You listen to too many true crime
I do listen to a lot of true crime podcasts. I don't want anybody to freak out and be like, oh, there's a murderer. Not yet.
Not unless Regal comes up before you.
Then we'll see.
He says Fitz made a few quiet inquiries and found that the watchtower signal had been lit as soon as the ships were sighted, but that the red ships had made extinguishing it one of their first goals. What of their coterie member, I asked. Kelvar looked at me in surprise. Burl had been recalled weeks ago for some essential duty inland. He had gone to Tradeford, Kelvar believed. And the day after the battle, reinforcements arrived from South Cove. They had not seen the signal fire, but messengers were sent out on horse had gotten through to them. I was present when Kettricken commended Duke Kelvar for his foresight in setting up a relay of horse for such messages, and sent her thanks also to Duke Shemshi of Shokes. I just want to say that's like a really hard thing to say. Duke Shemshi of Shokes.
Duke Shemshi of Shokes.
Yes. And she gave them some of the warships that they captured. They divided between the two places so they could further rely on themselves rather than the largesse or the reaction time of Buckkeep itself. And that's a huge gift. And they were, of course, very grateful to her as well for that.
Yeah. Well, this is so good. Like good thinking on Kettricken's part.
Yes, yeah.
Because she's doing it now where Regal would have to be crazy to dispute her openly about it. He's not there to make it look like a bad idea.
Mm-hmm. And she knows that they have to protect themselves, and she commends them on the relay of messages because she knows messages might not be getting sent.
Yes.
To call for aid.
And so I think it's just so smart. Because the way she does this, it's so different from before where I don't know what I'm doing, you're in charge. But now she's so tactfully oh, I'm gifting you this so that you don't have to wait for us. But the underlying text is, you will not be burns. We will not let that happen again. I'm going to give you protection while I can.
And specifically says they no longer need wait for warships to arrive, but could dispatch their own for mutual defense. So also, she probably phrased it like, if we're besieged, you can come and help us too then. We don't have to have all of our ships in one place. So it's offered as like a strategic gift, but it's giving the Dukes their own agency to defend themselves without any aid from Buckkeep, because there's not going to be any aid in the future, probably.
Right. And it helps make them look more fondly on her. It helps them stay together, as instead of those two splitting apart into two separate entities, and just really sets up for the future her ability to rule and letting them know that she still cares about them.
Yeah, definitely. Fitz says that the brief days of victory were a healing balm to all of us. We had fought and fought well. Neatbay would rebuild, and the OutIslanders had no hold in Bayguard. For a brief time, it seemed possible that we could win free of them entirely. And that seems to happen after every battle that they have. There's a brief respite from the dread that kind of occupies everybody's head.
Right.
Songs were already being sung of the Queen, and they're toasting to Queen Kettricken's unborn baby. And finally, Lady Grace sees and talks to Fitz and recognizes him. So, she had said after greeting me quietly, my kitchen dog boy has the blood of kings in him. No wonder you advised me so well those years ago. And Fitz kind of accepts and compliments her back that we've both grown in what we're doing.
He mentions that when he first met her, she was just a child who didn't know what she was doing. And
she was like a year older than him, and he was like 13 at the time or something.
Yeah. And she clearly didn't know what to do. She was very unsure of herself. And now it seemed as though she had always been a duchess. She's so graceful and poised and a natural leader.
Just needs some help. And I'm sure Chade put a good advisor over there too to like learn from.
Yeah.
But just being accepted and being comfortable in your role is such a big thing.
Right.
And so they have a little conversation here, and she remarks, not a dog boy anymore? She asked with a wry smile. Dog boy? Man wolf, observed someone. I turned to see who had spoken, but the hall was crowded and no face seemed turned to watch us. I shrugged as if the remark were of no consequence, and Lady Grace appeared not to have even heard it. She handed a little piece of jewelry to him that she had made to commemorate the fishbone ordeal, and handed it to him on a balcony on a dark evening when the lights of Duke Kelvar's watchtowers glittered like diamonds against the black sky. First off, someone comments again that he has similarities to a wolf or is in conjunction with a wolf, and that's not the little girl.
Yeah.
So I'm sure on the battlefield some glimpses were seen of Nighteyes when they were fighting. And then I wanted to point out that last line as well, because that's the story that Chivalry said. Yeah. And Fitz, in his own words, kind of remarks that she had grown up to be a great politician in her own right, or a great duchess in her own right.
Yeah, it's a good ending. It's cute that she took it so far to heart that she had a little pin made.
Yeah.
That are fish bones. I don't know. I think that's really cute. Now I want a fishbone pendant. But I wanted to ask, do you think somebody really did say that out loud? Man wolf? Or do you think that was somebody skilling, like one of the coterie members skilling?
Interesting.
Do you think it was Nighteyes, maybe?
I don't think it was Nighteyes, because I think Fitz would have recognized that voice if it was Nighteyes. Skilling, maybe. That's an interesting thing, because she doesn't appear to hear anything.
But also, how else would they know where the queen was if they didn't have someone to skill to them to tell them that was one of Regal's spies?
True.
How did they know where the queen was? We didn't talk about that.
I don't know. It might have been the only big tent. I'm not sure. It must have been skill knowledge of some sort.
Right.
One of them looking out over the battlefield, kind of flying along and finding Queen Kettricken and relaying that information to the captain of the OutIslanders or something. I'm not sure. The only thing that like makes sense to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that means there has to be a coterie member hidden there somewhere.
You think so, huh?
I don't know.
I don't know. I think you can direct
Conspiracy.
them.
There has to be a spy regardless.
Yeah, or at least, they could have the OutIslanders captains or whoever's leading them recognize the touch of a coterie member and be able to communicate with them in their head.
Fair.
So if that coterie member could find somebody even from the comfort of Tradeford or Buckkeep, they can then reach out to the captain or the leader of the OutIslanders and this is what I know, this is where they are.
That's fair. I guess we just don't know if anybody other than Robred is skilled.
People are susceptible to the skill, though,
That's
because Verity is able to influence the navigators. So
I just don't know. I mean, we don't know anything about the skill, but I know that they can talk through the skill. But is that because the other person is skilled and trained in some way, or
Regal isn't?
That's fair.
I think Regal's a little bit of a special situation, but I still think you would be able to, because what Verity did was try to be extremely subtle and not recognized.
Right.
So I feel like if you wanted to, you could just talk to somebody in their mind.
The way dragons do.
Yeah, the way dragons do, pretty much, yeah. So yeah, like you said, this ends on a uplifting note-ish until you get the little warning of like, oh, people are kind of recognizing Fitz as maybe being close to witted.
Right.
And it's just a little warning and foreshadowing for the future.
Yeah. I don't know. This is such a good chapter. I was gripped the whole way through.
It is a very exciting chapter. Something actually happens in this one. This book in general is, I think, the most action-filled out of all of them. The third one has some very exciting scenes, but that's mainly when Fitz is on the run.
Yeah.
And the very, very end. Otherwise, it's mainly just traveling and talking, which also grips me, and I love those scenes. But in terms of action, I think this book, Royal Assassin, is much more flushed out with that sort of thing. Thank you for tuning in to our 52nd episode. That's
One
fantastic.
year in.
One year in. So if you want to reach out and talk to us about anything, please let us know. We're at isfitzhappy@gmail.com, or you can message us at isfitzhappy at any of the social medias.
We did it. We got a whole year.
1 year. I am having a celebratory scotch.
I am just drinking plain old water.
Pour yourself a glass of wine. It's right there.
That's true. It is literally right next to me. So we're doing something a little different for this episode. Still talking about what you guys sent in to us, but this time we're focusing more on questions you guys had about the pod and our opinions on the books.
And I do want to start off with a couple different stats, things like that.
Yeah.
Overall, our two most popular platforms to listen to this is on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. A total of, it looks like 30% almost on Spotify, almost 25% on Apple Podcasts, and it goes down from there. A lot of the people, of course, which makes sense, is from the United States.
Right. Well, it doesn't make sense because when we started, that was not the case.
That's not the case, but it's the top three are still all the English-speaking countries. So,
right, which is fair.
yeah, United States, United Kingdom, and then Australia. And then there's a kind of almost a tie with Germany and Netherlands. So there's a lot of little European countries as well listening in. Canada's in there, and I don't know, there's people from all over the world. So welcome in. Thank you for listening to us.
Did you say?
I said welcome in, but it sounded like
welcome in.
Yes, welcome in.
Isn't that? Oh no! All I think of is Denmark, Wisconsin. They're the Vikings, and they have a sign in the. It's a very small town in
It
Wisconsin.
might be Danish. I'm not sure.
Welcome in the sign, but spelled with like the V instead of the W.
Probably very stereotypical and everything.
That's what I thought you were saying, and I'm like, not that I haven't said worse about Canada. So like,
we're sitting at about 200 followers on Spotify, which is fantastic. Thank you so much.
That's so many people.
Yeah,
that's more people than were in my high school. So thank you guys.
And the artists that they're listening to on Spotify are Taylor Swift, Ariana Grande, Arctic Monkeys, Hozier, and Queen at the moment. That changes like week to week, but right. Taylor Swift and Ariana Grande are usually in the top 5. I think that's mostly Emma.
I do. My alarm every morning Swift. Is Spotify Taylor Swift. So, and I listen to her a lot. But also, I must say that for a really long time, the Beatles were in there because my alarm used to be Here Comes the Sun. And it would go off multiple times a morning because I snooze my alarm all the time. That was also my number 1 listened to song on Spotify last year.
Nice.
So I had to go ahead and change that. But yeah, so it might be a little skewed.
But total, we've had about, I can't really say exactly because podcast stats are a little wonky in how they record things. But we've had a total of, I don't know, maybe 200 to 250 listens per episode as people are working through our back catalog. Mm-hmm. So again, thank you so much. I think we get about 150 to 180 depending on content and stuff when an episode first comes out, but people are working through the old episodes. So yeah. When you get to this episode, thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, we appreciate you.
Yeah, so we'll get to some questions that you guys submitted for us.
Yeah. So we asked you guys for lots of questions, and you guys delivered. The first question we got, which actually we got a couple different versions of, is, are you planning to do the full series or just this trilogy?
And we're going to do all 16 books.
Yes.
So we're in the second book right now. We finish up the Assassin's Quest. We will move on to Live Ship Traders, that trilogy, go back to Tawny Man, then go to Rainwild Chronicles, those 4 books, and then finish out with the last trilogy. So you will hear from us for a long time.
Yes. The next question is, what made you decide to start a podcast for these books?
Well, we mainly wanted other people to talk to, right? That's kind of like what I was thinking about. I think it was you who first brought up the potential to make a podcast. Right. And it was like in a joking manner.
Yeah, I definitely was joking, like, oh, we should just make a podcast because I couldn't find that much discourse online.
Right, yeah. So, yeah, it was, I think, what is it? Late fall 2019.
Yeah.
And then 2020, we kind of were talking about a little bit more, but it was still kind of a joke. And then in February, like, we should really do this.
Yeah, it was. We just decided, why not? We have free time and we like this series and it'd be a fun activity to do together as a hobby. So here we are.
Yeah.
A whole year later. And another question is, do you have any book recommendations not related to Rote?
Yeah, lots. But it's really hard to just say, like, hey, you should read this if you like Realm of the Elderlings, because a lot of these series don't relate specifically to Realm of the Elderlings. There's a lot of differences in Robin Hobb's work that doesn't translate to other fantasy series I've read.
Right.
But I will say, and I will always recommend, Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. Even though it is not a first-person series at all, it has wonderful foreshadowing and fantastic character development. But like Realm of the Elderlings, it's hit or miss with people. So it's a kind of like, I hate this or I like it kind of thing. So it's really in between. I personally find it absolutely fantastic. And I'm just going to list off a couple other books. Guy Gabriel Kay's Lions of Al Rasan. That was a fantastic, like, medieval Spain kind of book. It was very good. Seth Dickinson's Trader Baru Cormorant. Jeez, I can't pronounce anything. I read the first book of that trilogy. It was very good. I have not read the other two, so I can't say how that ends. Dune is one of my all-time favorite books of all time. All-time favorite books of all time. Wow.
I got that.
It's a really good book, I guess. It is. It's very, very good. Sci-fi, fantasy, half and half kind of thing. The Library at Mount Char by Scott Hawkins is a very, very good novel as well. And The Magicians by Lev Grossman. All of those are, I gave a couple novels and a couple trilogies, and Wheel of Time is the only other epic fantasy in there. But I will say The Magicians does deal with a lot of mental health issues as well that Robin Hobb gets into, kind of the formation and the PTSD and everything like that in Hobb's books reminds me a little bit, or Magicians reminded me of Robin Hobb as well. So deals with some of those traumas.
Yeah, my list is much shorter compared to that. I
could list a bunch of them, but it's really hard to pick and choose.
I have a lot of books that I love and hold dear to my heart, but I'm also somebody who typically only reads YA books, which I don't think necessarily translates to a lot of our audience. So I tried to stick away from things that are too, like, young adult. But I still think if you're curious, you should check out the Red Queen series by Victoria Aveyard. I think is how her last name is pronounced. It's really good, about a girl who discovers she has magic powers, even though she's not supposed to because of her blood type. It's very caste-y and just about breaking through. A lot of characters that are difficult and frustrating, and there's a lot of twists and turns that really made me frustrated in a similar way to how I get frustrated reading Robin Hobb. But it's super good. And then the Grisha series by Lee Berdugo. I think that one's so fun. It's really interesting. It's a magic series. I don't know. I feel like the
Netflix is coming out with a series on it, actually.
If you don't want to read it, but you need something on Netflix to watch. I just thought it was a really fun, interesting story and had cool magic in it. And finally, the Graceling Realm series by Kristen Kishore. It's another magic book. It's kind of in medieval-esque times, and it's about people who have to hide their magic, but struggle to do so because if you have magic, you have two different colored eyes, which pretty obvious. But it's, I don't know, it's a really cool series. It really dives into the feeling of otherness, and I don't know, I just really like that. And again, made me feel like that's similar to what we read with Fitz, except it's a little bit harder to hide being a Graceling than it is being witted.
Lots of different books that we could recommend, but honestly,
as book lovers, it's hard to pick your favorite children, but if we must. Another question we got is, which characters are you most attracted to?
Yeah, who would be your hall pass?
If they were real.
And I think I would mainly go with Kettricken or Althea. Althea has a boat, so that's really cool. Could sail around. But Kettricken just seems like awesome in pretty much all regards. Fair. So
I feel like, especially after just reading that she was like
wielding a two-handed sword, like a
barefooted,
great sword.
I don't know. That's just a very cool image.
Kettricken all around, then.
Yeah, that's fair. I have Rurisk because he seems like a really nice person.
He just sounds hot.
Yeah, he does.
He reads really attractive, you know, like him and Chivalry would be the power duo at the high school or whatever.
Oh yeah,
or college.
For sure. I don't know. He just seems like a nice person as well as hot, which is really nice. I also have Regal on my list, which is a little controversial, but
hey, he's a pretty boy.
described as extremely handsome. I can't help it. I don't know. Also, I love the flair for dramatics. Would I hate being upstaged in the person being the most dramatic in a relationship? Maybe. Would I still
And it doesn't have to be in a relationship either.
Maybe it's a one-night stand, you know?
The whole pass.
Who knows? Oh. Also, Burrich is on my list because, come on. He's nice. He has his faults, but so do we all. So
you can fix him.
No, I don't need to fix him. I'll leave that for Molly later on or whatever. But then, yeah, I also like Althea and Kettricken because they're very attractive people. So I assume everyone in this book is attractive. I don't know. I just read them all as models.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I would say Fitz, except I don't know. I feel like I'd become a starling, and I don't think I could do that. Okay. What was the most irritating part of the first trilogy to you?
You go first. I'm not sure.
Okay. I think that it's Fitz's lack of conviction to do anything 100% of the way. He has a lot of inner conflict of, should I just run away? Should I serve the king? Should I be an assassin? And I think his lack of picking what to do and sticking with it is a big fault of his, which is fair. And I think there's outer sources like really playing into this, and obviously no one's perfect, but I think that's what I get most frustrated in reading this is if he would just either stay with the king all the time in the very beginning or like kill Regal or just run away. I feel like a lot of things would be, you know, solved. Yeah. And I think just reading the series, I always get frustrated at how he never does anything, never seems to do anything 100% unless it's on accident, like with his wit bond to Nighteyes.
Right. Well, that's a pretty good answer. I was mainly thinking more of like Galen was the most irritating part.
That's fair.
To me, because it's horrible to read the abuse from Fitz's point of view, plus you can see what he's doing to the coterie members as well.
Yeah, that's
and he's
fair.
just kind of running unchecked. Otherwise, it's just the gullibility of pretty much everybody in the series.
Right.
They just take things at face value, except for a few select characters, and you know, even if those few select characters know what's truly going on, they can't act because of the good of the kingdom or whatever.
Yeah.
In regards to Regal specifically. So it's a give and take there. It's just frustrating because of the plot itself. Still good. It's just frustrating to read.
Yeah. So how did you discover Robb and Hobb? And when did you first read Hobb? And like, how do we know each other?
Well, we met at work.
Yes.
This was 4.5 years ago. We met at work. Yeah, about that. We've been dating for 4 years now. Mm-hmm. And within that time, I forced you to read this series.
Yep, basically.
I had heard of this series and started reading the series from fantasy.reddit.com, the fantasy subreddit. It was one of the recommendations that was always popping up here and there, and it had been on my to-read list, and I got around to it and absolutely fell in love. It's fantastic. So I forced Emma to read it when I got the chance.
Yeah, it was definitely a fun book series. I'm glad that you pushed me into it. I did just read it really recently for the first time, so this was basically my second time through. But yeah, I'm with a veteran over here. He's been reading it over and over again for a while. Okay. Do you want there to be a movie or TV series about this book series? And if you do you have any ideas for the cast?
I think I've said before, maybe on the podcast, I'm not sure, that I would probably prefer an animated, just because a lot of the magic, the inner workings, the time skips, the different characters and plot lines introduced would really be hard to do with a TV show, let alone a movie. I don't think a movie could work.
No, definitely not.
But in terms of fan castings, I'm terrible with actors and actresses and like thinking of people. But I think it would be fun for Carrie Elwes and Robin Wright to play Kettricken and Burrich back when they first filmed, Princess Bride.
Yeah.
I think that'd be kind of fun. But other than that, like I really don't have a specific image in my mind. When I think of the Fool or, Amber or Beloved or Lord Golden, any of those, they could be played by different actors or actresses every time, honestly. And it wouldn't bother me too much. But also I kind of picture like Cate Blanchett as Bob Dylan in the biopic that she did. She was one of the versions of Bob Dylan.
Mm-hmm.
So she could have fit that role. But again, like if it's a movie or a TV show, those time skips and them growing up, it really is hard to pinpoint like perfect fan castings because there's so many different versions of the characters.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah. I think I would love to see a TV series go in depth. Maybe like the way the first couple seasons of Game of Thrones were done, where it's in depth. I don't know. I didn't read or watch Game of Thrones. I just know it was done well up until like the fifth season or something. So I would love that for this series. As for casting, I think I would think that Tilda Swinton would play a really good Fool. I just think that she has a good definitely androgynous look to her. And then Regé, oh no, I'm doing it wrong. Regé-Jean Page would be a good Regal. He played the main person on Bridgerton, which is a Netflix show that I watched recently that I really liked. And I just think he has something about him. Seems like he'd make a really good villain. And he did not play a villain in that series. And I think that would be a good thing for him to tap into. And he's also really hot. So he'd be perfect.
It helps.
Yes.
But yeah, for like the main characters, for like Fitz, I have no idea. Like no clue. No clue.
Yeah, it's so hard because of the age that he ages, and I don't know. I don't think I could pick somebody for each age even, but I'd probably be happy no matter who played the part as long as they made him really angsty. Right, yeah. So we'll just squeeze into the next question then, I guess. If you could read Realm of the Elderlings from another point of view, who would you pick? I'm going to narrow it down to more specifically the Fitz series.
The first trilogy, you mean? Farseer trilogy?
Yes.
Yeah. I really liked this question because I love thinking about different parts of this. And as a reader, I would love to have another point of view on the villain side. So like Regal would be fantastic to view it from. However, also, as a reader, I would want a new series and not retread the same kind of events and ground.
Okay.
So if Robin Hobb was writing a new perspective of covering the same events, I would want something a little bit outside of Buckkeep's view. So I think the Pale Woman or Kebble Robred would be fantastic. Because then you could see pinpoint the events where Regal and Galen are making contact with them and doing all the little spying things and then organizing the raids and what they're doing to terrorize the OutIslanders, so you get a better depth of feeling for the Tawny Man trilogy. I think that would be a really good point of view.
That's an interesting take. I like the idea of knowing what's going on behind the scenes with Kebble Robred. I don't think I would have picked him naturally, but I like that after hearing it. Although I feel like with Regal it'd be really cool because Fitz doesn't pay attention to social life or really fashion unless it's thrust upon him, and that Regal would be all about all of that detail.
It'd be like a political sphere more so. That would be fun.
And we'd get to see a little bit more of what's going on in the inner duchies, because I don't know, I feel like it's removed enough from what Fitz sees that I would be interested in it. Yeah. I also, though, would really like to read from Chade's point of view or even Shrewd's. I think that those are fun characters to see the inner working of their mind. Okay. What character do we think we are most like in this series? And what character do we think the other is most like?
This is also like super hard for me because I feel like I relate to Fitz the most just because we have the most point of view from him. Mm-hmm. We walk through all of his emotions and his issues all the time. So living in that character most often is like, oh yeah, Fitz is great. Like I can see myself in these issues. But beyond that, I don't know where I would put myself.
That's fair. I think I would put you as Verity just because I think you're very similar in that you are very good at what you know and sometimes feel dissatisfied if you are thrust into a position you don't feel fully ready to do. Even if your skills are suited to that position, if you don't feel ready, you're like, I don't want it. So I feel like you are like that. Also, in like the way that he's like super oblivious to what Kettricken is thinking of him. Like,
yeah, that's true.
I feel like that's very you. Although I would say that you are like Fitz in that you're very quiet and you pick up on more than you let on from the outside. So you don't feel the need to talk as much.
I am the quiet one in this, this
don't let the
partnership
podcast fool you guys. But I personally think that I am most like Althea because she's super headstrong and stubborn and has a temper. And whenever she's mad, she tends to make decisions that aren't thought all the way through, which is highly relatable to me. More like living her life out of spite 90% of the time, which I don't think I'm that bad, but...
Because of your flair for the dramatic, you like to think that you're that bad?
Yes, definitely. Also, I think it would be cool to be like on a ship. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
I also thought you're similar to Kettricken in that you have compassion and passion for certain things, and you're very invested in certain things that you do. And then like Burrich, where you know what you're good at and will pursue those passions, but kind of similar to what you ascribed to me with Verity. If you are put in a situation where like, this is unfamiliar to me, or like, I don't think I should do this, you kind of just don't want to, or are quiet until you're pushed right to the forefront of it.
That's fair. That's fair. That's a really fun question, I think. Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of different attributes that you can find from a bunch of different characters. So.
Definitely. Oh, we got a couple questions asking if we're going to do a face reveal and what we look like, and to just a general, like, more about us as people.
Surprise, we already did a face reveal. It was like
Should have been here earlier. Yeah. Just kidding.
It was like a month into our podcast, or a couple months in or something. Yeah. I think it was a few months in, but we did it on our Instagram stories. Yes. So like, we're not hiding our faces for any reason, and I'm sure you'll see us in the future. Yeah,
we can even post a picture for this episode. I mean, we don't like... We're not trying to shy away from the spotlight. We just didn't think...
Oh, yeah, big spotlight.
We just didn't think it was as important as the topic we're talking about, I guess. Right. So it just hasn't really come up a ton. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, we do have faces, and we can show them to you guys.
I'm sure you guys knew that we try to keep it as professional as possible at all times on this podcast. So.
Clearly.
But yeah. I mean, I'm sure we can, go to a con in the future sometime. Right. And like, if you are in the area, we'll say like, hey, like, we're going to be at this place, meet up and we can talk or something. Like, we're not shying away from meeting any of you or talking face to face or even showing who we are. So you'll probably see more of us in the future.
Definitely. We'll be here for a while, about 14 more books. So
yeah, like 10 years.
I am sure you will see lots more of us. But generally as people, we're both big nerds.
Yeah.
I am obsessed with Animal Crossing and Breath of the Wild currently. So that's what I spend the rest of my free time doing when not focused on Rob and Hobb. Or starting crafts. I don't really finish them too often, but...
Patience over here.
I don't know.
I play lots of video games as well. It's in the pandemic times, it's pretty much how I talk to my friends. That's like the only contact outside of Emma that I have is playing video games and talking to my friends online like that. I like trying different whiskeys. I like chilling alone. Fantasy. I'm actually, believe it or not, like not a huge TV person or anything like that. Or I like movies and I like TV shows. I'm never in the mood to start them, really.
No, I have to push for that. Yeah. I'm a big TV I want TV going in the background of my life at all times, basically.
I'm fine with that too, but like, I don't care if I watch it or not.
It depends on the show for me, but I have a lot of interest. I have my fingers in a bunch of different pots.
Mm-hmm. But definitely both big nerds. We both like reading quite a bit. Although I've slowed down and just been in this series for a while now.
Yeah, I've still been reading somewhat regularly, but it is hard to get into a book and then have to stop to read one chapter of another book and then come back. It's really odd. It does mess up some schedules.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely something I want to work on and read and finish more books again this year.
Yeah.
As well as do the podcast, of course.
Well, with the big virus going around, I think motivation has been a little low.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so on that note of books and reading, somebody asked us, do you save discussions for the podcast or do you talk it all out beforehand before you start recording?
We do not talk beforehand, usually. So any discussions we have specifically about that chapter, we'll usually say it to each other for the first time while we're recording.
Yes. So whenever you hear one of us surprised at the other's take, that's real. We aren't acting.
There's been a couple times where we've discussed beforehand, but that's usually about the series as a whole or bigger concepts. Mm-hmm. We've had a couple discussions about like the mythology stories when we had the long diatribe about where the Pocked Man actually came from, mm-hmm. if the gods were dragons and things like that. We've discussed that a little bit, but mainly when we're doing chapter by chapter, we only talk about it on the podcast to kind of keep that conversation and that conversation tone to everything.
Right. Yeah. And it's hard too because I don't want what I'm reading to affect how Luke is reading the book. And mm-hmm. I think vice versa. It's more fun if we come in and butt heads. Yeah. Not that we set out to do that. We just naturally come upon that.
It's really apparent in this episode, actually, where you read the watch captain as being like...
rude
or, sinister in some way. I'm just like, he was just joking around with Burrich and laughing at his subordinate, you know?
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that we do not plan ahead of time. And we also read the books a little differently, I think.
Yeah.
I have a paperback version that I write notes in, including ideas for memes in the margins. And I only write down something that I think I won't remember immediately upon talking. I'm pretty good at remembering my thoughts on what I have read.
And I use my Nook, my tablet, to read the chapter twice every time. So I go through it, read it, maybe highlight a couple things I want to talk on. And then the second time through, I really go through and highlight the crap out of the pages and mm-hmm. quotes that I want to read, that I want to touch on. And sometimes at the same time I'm doing that, I take notes in a Google document if I'm actually feeling, like I want to take notes at that point. Last few chapters I haven't, but before that I have a long list of chapter notes. So we do it a little bit different, for sure.
Yeah. And it's fun always to see the things that like I thought were super important that maybe Luke didn't even look at, or he'll start reading a quote and I'm like, whoa, where is that? I don't have this page highlighted at all. So it's like interesting to see what we both come to the table with.
Yeah, definitely.
Last two questions. It's kind of a two-parter. What animal would you like to bond with? And if one of the rote characters from all the series, all 16 books, could be in your mind as a wit companion, who would you pick?
First off, I'd bond with a dog, probably. I'm allergic to cats, and so I wouldn't pick a cat for sure. I think any other animal would be very hard in the real life to bond with.
Fair.
I guess you could do a bird. They're longer lived, but I am not a huge fan of pet birds. They're fine, I guess. I don't know. Dogs are just awesome, so probably a dog.
It's fair. I want to say dog, but I feel like that's basic.
It is. But dog, like, it's basic for a reason.
Yeah, dogs are cute. I love dogs. I love all animals, really. I think it would be fun to have a cat, like a wit partner as a cat, because I want to look like I'm a witch whenever I go places. I think that would be really fun. I could change my whole aesthetic to fit that. Or, I mean, if I didn't have to be realistic, I think it'd be cool to have like a tiger. I don't know, because they have like cool abilities. Maybe I'd get faster. I don't know.
It's a big prey animal, though.
Yeah.
Like a predator animal, excuse me. So you'd have to continuously find prey for it.
I know, that would be the hard part, is keeping it fed.
Buy a ton of raw meat.
Or go to a dumpster.
Yeah.
Outside of Walmart. Tiger King reference for any who did not watch.
Oof.
Yikes. But also, I think I decided on mouse. Because they could get around places that I couldn't.
Interesting.
And if I locked myself out of my apartment, just slide them underneath the door frame and they could give me my keys.
That's a really tiny mouse.
Well, mice are small. Rats are big. Mice are small. And they can fit into the size of like a pinhole or something. Maybe it's not pinhole, but it's very small because all their bones like deconstruct or something. I don't know. I don't know anatomy of people, let alone mice. But I do know that they can fit in
smaller
holes in their body. Shape looks like they could.
I do love cheese, so we could bond over that.
That's
for
true.
Sure. Big cheese guy.
And then who would you pick from the series to be in your head as a wit partner?
I wrote down 2 names for this. One is Leftrin from Rainwild Chronicles, because he just seems very steady.
Okay.
He knows like what he wants in life, and he like just would give me the like the uncle advice kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just like, hey man, just do what you want to do. I don't know. And he was pretty passionate about, protecting those he loved in the series as well. He's one of the few people in the Rainwild Chronicles that didn't annoy me at some point. Well, he was, probably throughout that whole series. And then I also have Webb down.
Oh,
he's the Old Blood leader that comes out in the Tawny Man trilogy.
Sure.
He also, I feel like, could give great advice or just talk through things as well. But if I was like, feeling dangerous, I'd also have Nighteyes, because he has that like playful streak that
fair
you could like joke around with,
Huh. I think my natural instinct was to pick Chade, because he knows a lot about everything, and that would come in handy all the time, I think. I mean, job interview, he could be like analyzing their body language. I don't know. I feel like it has like little details that like would come in handy that I can't just think of off the top of my head, but I love that idea. But also, I think it would be cool to share a conscience with the Fool, because the Fool can see the future. And although it might be a little annoying, although I don't know if he's a wit partner or like deceased wit partner in my head, can he still see the future? I don't know.
Probably not. And probably just, all the jokes and
yes, I think
making fun of you constantly.
That would be a little annoying, but I kind of do that already in my head. So I think it would be nice, like, if I'm in the middle of an argument with somebody, to have a quick-witted person in my brain to think of witty comebacks in the moment.
There you go.
So, weird reasons to pick those characters, but, I think that's it. Those are the questions. Thank you guys for sending in such fun questions, as well as questions that are just kind of about us. It's fun to know what you guys are wondering about.
Yeah.
Because we don't get to talk a ton outside of the chapter every podcast. So it's nice to be able to, every once in a while, be able to answer those wider questions that don't have very many opportunities to get answered.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for everyone who submitted and asked something.
Yes, we very much appreciate you guys. And thank you for staying with us for a whole year.
Yeah.
Or
Big
if you're new, if you're new, that's fine too. Welcome for the next 10 years.
Thank you so much for all of your questions and everything like that. We love hearing from you. Hope you know a little bit more about us, and hope we can see you guys at some point in the future.
Yeah.
Thanks for sticking by us for a year. Congratulations, everybody.
Happy birthday to us all, truly.
Happy birthday to us all. You put up with us.
See you next year.